turn to silent. When you've used the microphone, can you make sure it's switched off when you're finished? Councillors are reminded that as of the 19th of June 2025, Plymouth City Council has entered a pre-referendum period, which ends tomorrow, and members should follow the protocols as set out in the published pre-referendum guidance. Specifically, councillors must avoid mentioning or referring to the referendum in their speeches. Discussions and debates today, the broadcast of this meeting will be stopped if this happens. Any queries relating to the pre-referendum period guidance should be directed to the monitoring officer. Moving to item 1, can I ask that the panel note my appointment as chair for this municipal year and Councillor Wood as vice chair, so it's an Egg Buckland massive. Apologies. Moving to item 2. Any apologies, Jake? Do we have any
Thank you,
apologies
Chair.
for today?
Apologies from Councillor McLean.
Thank you very much. Moving to item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any councillors that have any declarations of interest in respect of the items on the agenda? Councillor Noble?
I'm not sure if it will come up, but I'm a governor at St Matthew's Primary and Nursery Academy.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. Anybody else with declarations of interest? Thank you very much. Moving to item 4, minutes of the meeting that took place on the 6th of February 2025. Does the committee agree the minutes from the last meeting? Those of you who were here, any issues? Thank you. Can I get a proposer to agree the meetings? Thank you, Councillor Wood, and seconded Councillor Steele. Thank you very much. There are action points on those minutes which we will address at the end of the meeting, as is custom. So, moving on to Chair's urgent business. Oh, there was a vote that was required for that, for the minutes? Can I see a show of hands, please? Thank you. For the minutes, to agree the minutes. Okay, thank you. Those who are in attendance have agreed them. Thank you. I'm rushing through this. Moving to item 5, Chair's urgent business. There are no items of Chair's urgent business. So we can now look to the agenda for tonight. And the first item is Children's Services Achieving Excellence Improvement and Transformation Plan. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the report. We'll hear from you first and then I will introduce our guest.
Achieving Excellence, which is our ambitious and aspirational 3-year plan for children's services, which was developed early in 2024 with extensive engagement from staff, from children and from young people. The plan developed 10 key strategic improvement and transformation priorities, which have been the foundations of our improvement work across our children's social care, our education services, and work with partners since. The plan set out key milestones that would be delivered across 2024 to 2027 and included the priority areas which have been highlighted in our most recent Ofsted inspections. The plan is designed to improve outcomes for children and young people across Plymouth in key areas and also to create the conditions for future success in our workforce, in our systems and our delivery with partners. This review of progress has been completed at the end of the first year of the plan, and I'm delighted to be able to highlight so many achievements and improvements, including for children in need of support from social care and also from our SEND teams, who are now really receiving a much more timely and consistent approach, and approaches by our skills and post-16 teams. In other areas, for example, rates of school attendance for children across the city, we've really now strengthened some of those really important key relationships that we needed to work on so that we can have joint approaches so that we will have achieved some hopefully significantly improved outcomes this year. Priorities and milestones in the plan have been reviewed and reset for 25-26 to ensure that good progress continues to be made in all areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. We are joined by a member of the participation group this evening who will put questions to the Cabinet member and officers. please can I thank you for joining us today and coming to us with your questions. I'm going to invite Stuart Hogg, the Participation Practice Manager, to introduce this.
Okay, so yeah, as Councillor Blight says, I'm Stuart Hogg, Practice Manager Participation. We have our youth member here as well, and Nick, who leads some of our work in relation to some of our young people. So every young person we work with sees things differently and has different experiences of the services we're here to talk about today. So what the questions today are based on wide pieces of work that this is representing a wider group of young people, not just the person who's here. Whilst it's about improvement, Councillor Lang mentioned consistency, and lots of the plan and the report talks about consistency. And when young people have talked to us about this, they've talked about consistency of worker, consistency of contact, and consistency of decision making. And regular changes of worker that is mentioned in the previous work has made it difficult for some young people to build relationships, and that they didn't want to tell the story more than once. And we have a question about this today, don't we?
We do. We think this has improved a lot, and the report talks about recruitment and other things. We would like to know how you know if the number of changes for workers is reducing, and how is the changes done in a good way for the children?
Who's going to answer that question?
I'm going to start, but Martine might want to come forward. She can't reach the mic from there, but we'll see if she does. So we review the number of changes that any young person has regularly. We also look at our workforce data on at least a monthly basis, and often more often than that. We're really pleased to see the number of agency social workers going down and the number of permanent social workers going up, because we know that that means for children and young people less change, because permanent workers tend to stay longer, and that's obviously better for children, young people and families. In terms of young people in our care, we've already increased capacity in the service, so there are more social workers, and within the reforms around Families First, that's increasing further, and that's to ensure that each social worker can give the time that they need to their young people, so they can get to know them better and really focus on what's important to them. So they will work with less young people, which means that each young person should see their social worker more. We also know that that means that they're more likely to stay, because they'll get the benefits and the rewards, the bits that we love of working with children and young people, which is spending time with you and celebrating with you. In terms of those young people who are not in our care, who are still living at home, a lot of the work around the Family First and the reforms is about making sure that families don't experience change, and they might need different support at different times. So maybe sometimes they need a family support worker, sometimes they need a social worker, but they shouldn't have to have the change. We should reach in, the right people reach in to help when they're needed, rather than the young person having to change worker. So that's really how the service has been designed, and a big part of that is because that's what children, young people and their families have told us. Do you want to add anything to that, Martin? I've covered it. Does that answer the question?
That does. Thank you very much.
Would I be able to add something?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Lang.
I wanted you to know from a cabinet point of view, so there's 10 of the councillors that make up the cabinet. David Haley and I made the case very clearly about more money going into children's services, and one of the really compelling reasons was so that social workers' caseloads could reduce, and that helps with consistency. And I think it bears repeating Karen's point around agency staff and agency social workers, who it's not the quality of what they do, but it means that they aren't here permanently, and so a young person might find that their social worker changes. So that is a real priority to keep, and we are achieving that, but we still have more to do on that to make sure that we recruit as many permanent social workers who want to stay in Plymouth, working for the local authority, as we can. And again, some of the investment that has gone into Children's Services really supports that work, because we know how important that is to young people, and the idea of telling your story once is something that really resonates with me in terms of understanding how important that is. Nobody should have to keep telling people about the things that have happened to them unless they want to. They shouldn't, you know, that change of social worker should really happen less and less. That's all of our aspiration. Thank you for asking the question.
Any other response?
Thank you very much for that, but I would like to ask how the changes are made sure they're done in a good way if they have to happen.
That's an excellent question. So if a child, young person or a family member has to have a change of social worker, how do we make sure that that's done in the best way for them if the social worker is leaving, for example? Yeah, so obviously the ideal way is that the new worker and the old worker would come and visit you together to do that handover, that they would have made sure that they've given all of the information that's in their heads as well as written down in your records, handed over properly. Where that isn't possible, if someone does leave unexpectedly or someone's off sick, for example, for a period of time and we need to step in, then we would always ask the team manager to do that. So I'm sure you'll be aware that sometimes the social worker might change, but the manager might stay the same. And so that's really important. There would be a handover of information so that you don't have to do your own handover. I think it would. Some people would say that's what they experience by having to tell the story twice. Anyone else?
Thank you very much for that.
Okay, so if we go on to the next question, in the report, page 36, I think it says more work is needed to ensure all supervision is reflective and supports progress for children.
I have a question about this. Well, this is also about consistency. We would like to know how often the workers are asked about how they meet the 10 wishes.
Do I have any takers for that one?
So I think you've probably got one of the experts sitting next to you in terms of Stuart, who's leading the work on the 10 wishes. So I'm David Haley. I'm the director of the services that work with children and young people in the city. So the 10 wishes is really important, and I see it's somewhere there in terms of you've got copies of it, and that it's important because it's been written by young people, and young people have told professionals and people that work with them what they expect and want from us. So in supervision, we're asking that the manager and the social worker or the person that's working with the family, if they're not a social worker, that they just discuss the 10 wishes and see how they are using those in the work they're doing with you. And, you know, a test for that, and perhaps you'd like to test this out for us, is, you know, does that feel as if it's making a difference for you in those conversations that are happening? And you know, be interested for your feedback to Stuart and Nick about that. But it's our intention to make those 10 wishes come alive and for people to be using them in their practice.
Councillor Creswell?
We've actually brought in some big copies of the 10 wishes, and what we thought was really a good idea, and I think we've talked about this before actually, is that we all as all of us as cabinet members, scrutiny members, actually sign the 10 wishes and have perhaps their photographs taken with them. And I think what would be really helpful is you can't really keep that in your bag all the time, but to have a sort of like a smaller one, like a sort of an A5 one that we can have laminated and carry around as a good reminder for all the grown-ups in the room.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but actually I've got a question because this is such a good question.
Is that a question to us? Or
Yeah, well, in terms of well, it's a question to David really, in terms of how we as cabinet members get the feedback around how workers are feeding back about how they are embedding the 10 wishes in the work they do, and how that fits into the QA process. And I think that would be helpful for us to understand, because the question is particularly around workers, but actually that isn't fed back to me in any way in terms of how that is working, and I would quite like that to happen, and thank you, because I wouldn't have thought of it if you hadn't asked for the question. So is there a way that can happen to be in part of the QA process or something? I don't know where it would sit, but...
Yeah, so it is part of the QA process, and one of the strengths of the audit and quality assurance process that we do run in Plymouth is that it does contain a really strong element of children and young people's voice. It is a real strength here. Having worked in a number of local authorities, it really, really is a strength, and we keep developing it and building on it and making it better and better and taking the young people's feedback. But I think that the challenge that you pose, I think, is one that we need to develop on, because whilst we probably at the moment report on it more generally, we don't specifically in our quality assurance reports report on how our staff have thought about the 10 wishes and really pulled out what change that's made in terms of their practice. So I would suggest that we have a recommendation as we move to the end of this report, that we do bring that out, and perhaps in 6 months we could bring with the young people a report back to Scrutiny, so that we demonstrate to you that we have made that more explicit within our quality assurance process.
Just to say, I am starting monthly observations of the QA process, just so I understand how it works. So this would be quite useful, actually, because then I can also see how that is feeding into that process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so fostering is mentioned in the report, and young people have been told that the fostering service has started to make, quote, well-considered and ambitious improvements, and their aspirations are underpinned by significant support and investment.
Can you tell us about these aspirations and give us an example of investments, and do you believe these are making a difference?
This is why I didn't do the last one, because I thought you'd get bored of hearing my voice, and I desperately wanted to answer this one. There has been a lot of change in the fostering service and the support available to our foster carers, the Plymouth City Foster for Plymouth foster carers, in the last 2 to 3 years specifically. And I think the bit that reassures me the most and makes me know that it's making a difference the most is that we've done that with our foster carers. We haven't done it to them. So 2 years on the row, we've had what we called a fostering summit. So we invited all of our foster carers along with elected members and officers from across different parts of the service, including health and education, to come together and say, you know, what's working really well, what's not working so well, what more could we do? And the first one of those came up with loads and loads of ideas, and we made a lot of changes. And you asked what some of those examples were, and they range really. So we made some changes to the finances. So we increased what we pay our foster carers so that they can look after children and young people better. We also introduced a council tax allowance. So really, as a thank you from Plymouth City Council for everything that foster carers are doing, we offer them up to a full exemption, depending on how much fostering they do in a year. A lot of the changes that the foster carers were asking us to make, though, really interestingly, look a lot like the questions you've asked today. So they were saying it's not all about money. It's actually about consistency of practice. It's about knowing that if they've got 3 children in their care who've got 3 different social workers, that they can expect the same quality of service from every one of them. So a lot of the work that we've done has been with the workforce around culture. By that I mean helping people to understand that the way they work with children, young people and foster carers really makes a difference to how the foster carer feels and is able to do their job. So we've developed a commitment, much like Councillor Cresswell was saying, as you know, we've written what our wishes or requirements in fact are, and we ask every social worker who is working with a child placed with a foster carer to sign that as their agreement that they will treat the foster carer well, and they'll support them to do their job to the best of their ability. And that has really just come off this year, so we need to see whether that makes a big difference yet, but I'm sure it will. A couple of the other really important investments are our investment in Mockingbird. So some people will know about that and some won't, but that's a really important and special way of fostering, which is based on kind of an extended family model. So it takes a group of foster carers, and one foster carer in particular called the Hub offers sleepovers, support, arranges social activities for the group of foster carers and their children, and it becomes a bit like a big extended family. So rather than someone saying, oh, you're going for respite this weekend, you're just having a sleepover with someone that you know really well, and it doesn't become a big thing. And the foster carers who are involved, we've had 2 groups start already. The 3rd one we're interviewing for now, and the 4th one will be in place by the end of the year. The foster carers, the children and the young people, are telling us that it's been really life-changing for them. The first constellation, we call them, the first group just went all together on holiday to Butlins for the weekend, and by all accounts it was a wonderful event. So they really have come together. There's been other investments, things like increasing the social committee budget so that everyone can come together and enjoy activities together over the years. So lots of change, lots more to come. What we have seen from that is more people interested in fostering. So we've seen more children, and I think you asked me what the aspiration was. We've seen more children and young people being able to live in families close to or in Plymouth, and that includes children and young people who were placed far away from their families, their brothers, their sisters, being able to move back to Plymouth and live more locally. And I hope you'll agree that that's good news for those children.
I would agree, and thank you very much for that.
Councillor Lang?
Well, I was going to, I've read my notes and I've just ticked it off because Karen said it all. But I did want to say something about the Corporate Parenting Board, actually. I don't know if you know, we have a Corporate Parenting Board which has councillors on, but it also has representatives from lots of different partner organisations that help us look after children in the city, health and other organisations. And I think that, I'm talking about it in terms of aspiration, because we have real aspirations for that board to really tackle things that are not going right, that may not necessarily be council things, but they might be things that we think maybe the health side of things aren't doing very well. And so it's a kind of reassurance thing that we have very high aspirations for what that board will do and what it won't let just drift. And I do think in the past couple of years that board has really become a lot more robust in terms of what it tries to sort, what it demands in the nicest possible use of that word. And I think that's quite important to aspiration. And I can't really add anything to what Karen has said, except that the way that fostering is run now is very much around what young people and what foster carers are telling us they want from us, not that we assume it. And the message is, it's not about money, it's about support, and that looks like Mockingbird and events. And for instance, we have young people who choose an award at the fireworks for the past couple of years, and 10 young people come with their carers, and I think both times they've chosen a different winner to what the professional judges have chosen. So just being really thoughtful about any kind of event or thing we can do. I know that foster carers were given tickets for the summer sessions up on the Hoe, those kind of things, all the time, just being able to offer something that shows our appreciation for everything that they do for you, and then hopefully, you will be brought along as well to some of those nice things. Dartmoor Zoo give us, free family passes now, things like that, and we are finding a lot of businesses and organisations in the city are working out how they can get involved to support as well. So, yeah, I think it's a lot has happened in the past couple of years, but we will keep working to improve, and anything that you you think, you know, comes to mind that you think we can do to keep going, please, via Stuart or Nick, let us know.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay, so we've got a couple of more questions. So the report talks about a key priority being to further develop approaches so that all children in care and care leavers experience good health, accommodation, education and employment outcomes. So we have a question about that.
What difference would someone my age expect to see when they turn 18 compared to now?
They're great questions, aren't they? Someone said good question over there. Great questions. There has already been some really good progress in the services we deliver to our care experienced young people, which is reflected in the report. We can see that from our quality assurance activity, so the audits that we do, the conversations we've had with young people. We had practice week in November, and we've very recently had quite a thorough review of our care leavers service, so we can see that progress is happening, but we also know that there's some more to do to see a real impact. And so for someone of your age, what will we see over the next sort of 3 years, we would want to see a lot of that really embedding, and there are some areas where we know there's a bit more to do. So I think we would say we would definitely want to see a wider range of types of homes, so places to live, accommodation for young people, so that everybody's individual needs can be well met here in Plymouth. And there's lots of work already happening to make sure that that's available for everybody. But a real aspiration and commitment to do more. So where there has been funding available, care experienced young people have been a priority group for making sure that housing meets their needs well. One of the other areas that we've done with you and other young people in the participation service is when we reviewed the corporate parenting strategy, we did that together. And the same with the local offer. So we sat down together and we went through the old one and we said, okay, let's throw out what's not working. Let's make sure we keep what's working well. And the new corporate parenting strategy, which was presented to Corporate Parenting Board a couple of weeks ago, is really a much more user-friendly document. So young people can really see this is what I can expect and share with each other. And there was a great idea that came out of that, because one of the things that some of the younger young people said was, there's stuff in here about this local offer for care leavers and talking about a personal advisor, and we don't know about that yet at 12 or 13. And maybe it would be better if we don't want to know everything too soon, we don't want to meet the personal advisor too early, but if we knew a little bit about what to expect in the future, we might not worry about it so much. So together we're going to work with the participation team to develop a kind of introducing the local offer, introducing the personal advisor on a little card with a QR code so that people can access that earlier and know what support to expect in the future. So that's another thing. And the other thing I think I did want to say, and maybe Isabel or Amanda might want to come in, is we've done quite a lot of work together to look at the support for young people to make the best in their education, training and employment choices. At the moment, not enough of our young people who are over 18 are employed or in some form of education and training. They find it hard sometimes to keep that going with everything else that's going on in life. So we've done quite a lot of work to improve that offer. I don't know if one of you wanted to say something about that.
Thank you, Karen. So yeah, lots of work to improve that so that, as Karen said, there's something about looking into your future, isn't there, and thinking, I can be what I want to be, you know, if I see it, I can be it. So we're working really hard with businesses, with all sorts of partners to make sure there's lots and lots of opportunities for our young people so that they can live, work and enjoy staying in our city and feel they're making a really good contribution. Really good work there.
Thank you very much.
There's some more questions, I think. So, Councillor Lang and then Councillor Creswell.
I'll be very quick. In terms of what will be different when you turn 18, we'll have Care Leavers Hub will have opened, which has been a real aspiration of mine and the service for a while. I went to London and saw one about 4 years ago. We really need to have one of these in Plymouth, and we will have one. So you will be using that, which will have all sorts, and hopefully you'll shape what you want to see happen in there. We've got ideas about that, but obviously we want to listen to what young people think about that. There's, going back to the Corporate Parenting Board, things that have happened from there that are different now are things around free prescriptions, and also dental care, working with Peninsula Dental School, because those are areas that were identified that really weren't good enough, and we've worked hard as that group to improve things there. So I think those are some really tangible things that hopefully will be even more embedded and even better by the time you turn 18.
And for me, really important, those things of going into adulthood, getting, you know, the right careers and the skills and the training and such, which is really important. And we've been doing a lot of work on that. And what's really important is actually early on, when you're younger, you know, it's no good just doing those preparations when you're sort of like 17, nearly 18. It's actually, and that's for all young people really, finding out what sort of things you can possibly be doing, and sort of like at age 12, 13 and 14. And I've just got an example here, is that Skills Launchpad, which is at the moment based in the Barclays building, but is going to be moving to a new building, does a lot of work with our young care leavers. And I just got a little quote here from someone who, the funders and such, actually helped provide that young person with hairdressing equipment so that they would be able to start their career and their training to start college, which is just like really, really absolutely important, and will be life-changing for that young person who's going to go on to a fabulous career. So that's the kind of things that we're sort of thinking about, but thinking, and that's a really good question that you've raised, about preparing young people earlier rather than at the last minute, just before they're 18.
Thank you very much for that, guys, and I'm glad to hear that there are changes being made.
Okay, so we've been involved in some of that work, obviously, in terms of the feedback, and young people are always pleased to be involved in learning about improvements. And we have a last question, which links to that.
Do you tell other young people who are not involved in partition how things are improving and what they can expect to see from the services?
Anyone want to pick that up?
Well, it's a really good challenge. And when we were putting together Achieving Excellence, in the last few months, while we've been reviewing with progress with young people, we have particularly focused on groups of young people who meet regularly and we work with regularly, like our Youth Parliament, care experienced young people, our young safeguarders, and Ascend. And I don't think we have thought enough about how else we could engage with young people, and who else we might focus on. What ideas did you have?
Perhaps that's a question we could bring after the meeting when there's been time to think about
Happy
it.
to do that. Happy to speak with you about, and I know it's one of Stuart's targets for the year, is to increase the number of young people who we are engaging with, who are engaging with us. So it'd be really helpful to have a steer from you about some ideas about how we might do that even better.
And it might also be good if we can bring in some younger young people as well, especially as what we were talking about earlier with that other question that was raised. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but that might be also an area to look at.
Councillor Lang, I think this will be the last question.
Yeah, we talked a bit about this when we had some young people come to Corporate Parenting Board, actually, about how can we involve some young people who are not normally involved or might not normally want to be involved. And I think, you know, foster carers, they get a newsletter, don't they? And I don't know if newsletters are probably not very, you know, what young people want, but some kind of communication and I don't know what you think of this, with young people in terms of telling them about some of the stuff that they might want to know, or whether some of our voice groups might want to write something that can then be shared via foster carers with young people. I don't know if that might be a way of doing it, if you think people would sit and read something on their phone or something. What's the best way to communicate with young people? I'm not entirely sure myself, because it changes quite a lot, but I think it might be a good idea, and obviously not to put you on the spot now, but just to think about how you think people might like to receive that if they don't necessarily want to be in a group, or what could we do to encourage them to take part in a group, maybe even if it's a one-off. It doesn't have to be a continuing commitment, does it? It can be you can come once and have your say. So I think it's a really good challenge to think about, to make sure that everybody gets the same information, not only the people who are giving up their time to come and be part of our voice groups.
I do agree with that, and I do think there are several good ways to get the information out to young people. I think it should be a strive for social workers to encourage young people to come to the groups, and social workers telling young people about the changes that are being made.
So could we work with you to find out the best ways of making sure that we can get some of this information that you've seen as part of doing this work with Stuart and Nick, and that's in this report, out to young people like I think Vivian and Councillor Creswell and Councillor Lang have suggested? Well, could we add that to the work you're doing with Stuart?
Yes, I would be completely happy to do that. I think it's an important thing.
Thank you. And can I also say your point about social workers that you've just said, it happens to be the time of year when social workers have like their annual review of how well they're doing. And I think we could ask that question in all of the social workers' annual review, just to prompt that and just to help them to think about that. And that would be our commitment and a recommendation from this board on this report to do that in the next 3 months.
Thank you. We want to thank you very much for your questions and coming to join us this evening. Your questions were brilliant, and you've elicited some really good responses from officers and councillors. Thank you very much.
Not a problem, it was my pleasure.
So we're going to move to questions from councillors now, and you've got a high bar to reach, let me say. Councillor Steele, then Councillor Allison.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that. Those are brilliant questions, and they were really insightful. So, like, great work on holding the cabinet members and officers to account. That's an excellent potential future councillor. That's what I always think about when we have these people come along. So thank you for that. My question is going back onto some of the points that were raised in the Achieving Excellence review. So it mentioned the caseloads were within target, and across the workforce it's 19.4 children and 84% of supervision on time. Could you elaborate on what actually the target is? Because to me, as a non-expert, 19.4 sounds pretty high, because obviously that hides all the nuances there of the complexity of families. If you've got one family of 4 children, how many if you've got lots of single children, 19 would be breaking point from what I understand for social workers. So are our targets at the right place, and how well are we actually meeting them so that our workforce of social workers aren't being burnt out?
So my name is Martin Aquilina, and I'm one of the heads of service. And I'm also leading on the changes, some of the change work that we're doing around the reforms. And one of the very first things we wanted to do was to really look at those target caseloads. So whilst 19 is good for Plymouth, and probably nationally, 19 children is a good lower level. And if we were sort of talking in history terms, that would be lower than it has been historically. But what we recognise is actually that isn't good enough for our children. Our target caseloads as part of the reforms will be 12 to 14 children, and that could be 3 or 4 families. And that for some people sounds low, but actually that will involve and allow our social workers and create the space for social workers to do that really meaningful work with children and families, and be able to visit them on a much more regular basis than what our statutory guidelines tell us to do. We will be able to build those relationships, because that's the most important part of us working with children and families and affecting change. Without those relationships, it is really hard for us to do that. And I think that because of where we are currently, that is why sometimes our families will move into a crisis space, and that's the thing that we absolutely have to address over the next year. So the reforms are a really exciting time for us, because it has meant that we can think differently and quite creatively about actually who does what work when, and think about need for children instead of thresholds of harm. And that's going to be a real big culture shift for us, but also a way for us to really enable and allow our social workers to do the work they want to do with the children and families, and why they signed up to this place. So yes, it is too high. You're absolutely right that if it's single children, it's even worse. But if it's families as well, each family will come with its own set of complexities as well. But our drive, and we are moving towards that drive, we are getting there over the next 3 or 4 months, will move us into a space of 12 to 14 children, which will make our the work that we do much more meaningful and much more effective.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chair? And what impact do you reckon that will have on sort of reduction in reliance on agency workers? Because obviously they're significantly more costly than permanent social workers. So how is that being considered within one, sharing that out to the wider kind of region of so we can poach the best social workers from other local authorities, frankly, because I'm sure there's lots of social workers in nearby local authorities that would very much welcome only having a caseload of 12 to 14 children, like you say, so they can have better quality interactions with their families. So how are we linking that into that sort of reducing our reliance on agencies so we can have a bigger pool of permanent social workers?
I don't know whether my colleagues will want to come in at this space, but certainly the aspect of having 12 to 14 children will definitely attract people. And also Plymouth is a beautiful place to be and to live. So we have got really high aspirations in thinking about the way we want to, the conditions we want to create for our social workers, but also our non-social work qualified staff, to be able to come and do the really creative and innovative work with children and families, which is what we all signed up for when we decided to be social workers, all work in this field. As we've done our modelling, it does mean, and the reforms have allowed us to think differently about the work and the support that children and families receive, depending on the needs that they have. So that means we need less social workers in this space, which means we can be much more thoughtful about the social workers we want to work with our children and families in Plymouth. And like I say, the aspiration of having 12 to 14 children will attract social workers, because they know that they'll be able to come to Plymouth and actually do that good work.
Councillor Lang, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, going back to talking about the investment, it was very clear that there was a very clear quid pro quo around that, insofar as caseloads had to reduce, because I meet with Tracy Lee, I meet a group of social workers every 6 months, and caseloads kept coming up and kept coming up. And actually, I hate to use the J word, but we are on a journey, we are on an improvement journey, and caseloads were very much higher than this. You know, if I remember rightly, I'm talking like 28, 30 sometimes, you know, so we are making real progress. But to your point around recruitment, in the same way as foster carers say, it's not all about money, it's support. Social workers say, I need to be able to do the kind of work that Martine is talking about, and what the reforms are absolutely encouraging and demanding. You can't do that with high caseloads. And so that will be something that people will look when they think about their next move as a social worker. If caseloads go down to what our aspiration is, that will really help with recruitment and retention, you know, which is as important.
Thank you. Councillor Allison and then Councillor Krizanak.
Thank you, Chair. In the quality assurance section, strategic priority 8, there's a big rise in IRO escalations, 300%. Do we think this is an indication of an improvement in oversight there, or are there some concerns that we need to look at?
Hi, I'm responding on my colleague's behalf because she's not here. But yes, I can imagine that looking at that might make you think, oh my goodness, what's gone on? But actually, it's a really positive evidence, as you say, of increased oversight. So what we know is that our independent reviewing officers were raising issues with social workers and team managers, but they were doing it informally. Often citing, we know how busy they are, we don't want to add to it, but actually they have a statutory role to raise those concerns and to do it through a formal process, thereby the IRO escalations. And so it was a targeted piece of work to say, when you do this work, you need to evidence it. So that increase evidences that quality assurance footprint. And what we can also then see is that has been an impact because there are timeframes around it and a process around it. So we see that when the concern is raised, it's attended to, and young people see a change. So it's a positive figure, albeit looks frightening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your report on page 25, you have under K millstones for 25-26, you're talking about further development of our universal provision, family hubs and partnerships, early help in communities to better meet the needs in the local areas and reduce the need for statutory interventions with families. I would like just to express my gratitude for the work that you have already done, having opportunity to speak to individuals that are already using some of the family hubs that we already have in our town. The question that I have, what are the plans to extend that to the areas where those family hubs are not in place?
So we currently have in Plymouth now 11 family hubs, so 11 static sites, and we are in the process this year. So we've had funding extended again for this year, and an announcement to say that it's going to be extended again, which is really positive news. And we are now in the process of looking at the areas that don't have a static family hub and thinking about satellite hubs. So people will start to see other libraries and other buildings that will have a family hub logo on there, and where we are delivering training into those spaces so that people can go anywhere effectively. That's the idea, that people can go anywhere and get the same advice, guidance and signposting as they would in a statutory in the static family hub space. We do have to think about resources. Buildings aren't a massive thing for us in Plymouth. We don't have lots of them, but what we have found is that we've got lots and lots of services, our education services, schools are saying to us that they would be happy to come and be part of that space. We've got the YMCA has just recently come on board as a family hub. So we're trying now to think really quite creatively about where can we go and be part of that community. All of the families reform work is talking about how do we as statutory services, alongside our community and voluntary services, get out into our community so that people can access us and support when they need it in the space that they live, and they don't have to travel and work towards that. So that's the next start of the move. I don't think we will open any further family hubs this year, but we will be starting to open. I think on the plans now there's another 11 satellite hubs looking like we're going to be starting. Okay. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. During answers earlier about what can be expected at 18, university wasn't mentioned. And this was something that I highlighted in our committee meeting back in February, because Civitas state that 14% of care leavers under 19 do progress to higher education, albeit compared to 47% of others. In that report last time, we highlighted only 4 clear pathways, that being employment, independent living, community inclusion and health. But we didn't include higher education as a transition, nor do we state how any of those, that we have any commissioned services for those pathways. I know there's an action on funding that we will state at the end, but would you just outline how these young people are supported in choosing to go to higher education and educated on the associated costs that go alongside that, please?
So our children in care and our care experienced young people are actively encouraged to move on to whatever form of higher education may be best suited for them. I mean, fortunately, there's a wider range now. University works for some young people. T-level apprenticeships might work better for others. So there's a lot of options. We do financially support, so we provide a bursary to any care experienced young person attending university, a termly bursary for the full 3 years, and should the young person require to do an extra year, so for some young people they may need to do either a foundation course in order to access the course they want, or they may need to do one of the years twice. If life throws them a tough hand, then we will extend that bursary to ensure that they complete their course. And indeed, in some cases, we have also provided that for master's level study, because frankly, if any of my children get to that level, then I'm not going to say no, and never have. There are some additional things that we've added into the offer which are kind of not above and beyond what some local authorities do, but they're small things. They're what you would do for your own child. So we pay cap and gown hire for their graduation photos, for example. If they wish to take an additional guest, but there's a cost for that, then we will cover that. Some young people really want to take their former foster carer and their personal advisor, for example, or maybe they want to take somebody that was a member of staff for them, but they actually want to take a birth parent, but the birth parent wouldn't be able to go without our financial support. So we do those little things that make a difference. The numbers are probably still not as high as we would want, and there's some work, like Amanda was talking about earlier, around getting in earlier. So we are partnering with our local universities, which might not be the choice for the young person, but around aiming higher earlier. So, for example, you might want to speak about the young person you arranged for a tour of the university.
Yeah. So, going back to one of the things that you asked about aspiration. So what we've really noticed is, as I said, that lots of businesses and organisations in the city have started coming to us saying, how can we help and support looked after children and care leavers to achieve what they want to achieve. And I had a conversation at an event with a foster carer around a young person that she is caring for, who wasn't quite sure about what they want to do. They're 14 and but they are quite arty and into art, and so one of the people that had contacted us to say they wanted to work with us is the Vice Chancellor of the Arts University. So I sent him an email, and I don't know that they would normally do tours for 14-year-olds actually, but they were like, yep, bring them here and we'll do a tour and we'll show them around. And so there's much more of that kind of very bespoke, individual to each young person if they show an interest in something. And that's very much what the people who've come to us have said. You know, Craig Moore from Womble Dickinson has sort of said, you know, if a young person wants to do something, come to me and I will find somebody that can support them. And he's done that with mentoring a young person. So we're really establishing these connections, and it feels a bit like, you know, do a bit there, because it's individualised. It's not some, you know, monolith. It's what each young person wants to do. And I think the getting in early is something that we really think is really, really important. There's, of course, you get, you know, careers advice in school and all the rest of it, but we need to be doing that work and working with the virtual school as well to really understand what a young person might want to do and what we might need to put in place to support them getting, you know, work experience, support, opportunities that we would do for our own children. We need to be doing that for the children that the local authority look after.
I think that's a really important thing that Councillor Lang just said about these are, because we are the corporate parents, our own children. I think a few years ago, we actually, during the interval at the break at full council meeting, we actually sort of made commitments of things that we could offer our children and those leaving care or whatever, and we've got a variety. I think we ought to be doing it again, because we've got a variety of expertise, talents, and all sorts of things within the council, and things that we could possibly offer. I remember last time we had someone who was who works at the university and was able to offer sort of help for support for university applications or interviews or things like that. And probably that would be a worthwhile thing for us to consider doing again, because it must have been a couple of years ago that we did that.
Sorry.
So I still have all of those. For those of you that are still here, I have copies of what you pledged, so I can absolutely provide them for review, and then anyone new can. So if I could be invited, I'd be delighted to be. And I just wanted to add something else to what I'd said, because it's important to celebrate where young people support each other. So one of our young people who's at university at the moment, he's just finished his second year of economics degree, has delivered some training. He's, alongside managing to do a degree, he also works part-time for a charity who supports care experience and estranged students. He does some data gathering. I don't know, it's very complicated, it's over my head. But he did some training for our team around how to support young people to think about coming to university, which are the best universities to go to, because some offer better packages of support. So we really want to hear from our young people about how we can do it better. We recorded that training so it was available to anyone, and just really using the resources and encouraging our young people to take advantage of what we've got on offer. Had a request today from a young man who's just graduated from University of Manchester with a 2-1 degree in economics for some work experience. So I'm organising that. So if anyone works in finance, I have a very keen 22-year-old who is keen for some work experience. So please do let me know.
Thank you. Councillor Wood?
Thank you very much for those responses. Really, really good. I just wanted to have one very quick follow-up, and that was, you mentioned termly bursary. Is that in addition to what would be provided from central government? And is there a ballpark as to what that might look like?
Yeah, so it doesn't replace and it doesn't impact their bursaries that they're eligible for. And as I say, some universities also offer additional bursaries for care experience students. So none of that it reduces what we provide, and we provide £1,000 a term, so £3,000 a year for the 3 years, or 4 if required.
Thank you. And at that point, a really good point to end, You did. Sorry, Councillor Steele, thank you for reminding me. Councillor Steele, do you want to come back in, bearing in mind the time?
Yes, I was going to say, I'm conscious of the time, Chair, so I will ask a very brief question, and I'm happy for it to be sort of brought back later. So on strategic priority 10 around effective system enablers, we've got a key milestone around data insight and AI support new and effective ways of working. I'm not sure if it's for now because of the time, but I would be very interested in understanding more on what we're looking to do around that area. Because again, I think it feeds into that point around making it a better job for social workers if some of the more administrative things are automated, etc. So I would be really keen to understand what we're doing to be a kind of a hopefully a thought leader in that space and an innovator. So, but happy to have that sort of answered either after the meeting or brought back at a later date.
We can have a look at that in the work programme, potentially. Okay. Yes, thank you. Yes, and then Carol Ney, you have a question.
We have talked about things like note-taking, report, I don't know what the right terminology is, but writing reports and that kind of thing, and looking at how AI can help with that. We've had that discussion, haven't we? So that is the challenge, to work out where that will help. Because again, I think it feeds in then to the whole QA thing, and I don't know, some people maybe do like, I don't know how it is for social workers, maybe they do actually like physically doing it, but then there might be people that it would be quicker if you could get the most of it out that way, and then finesse it to the way that it needs to be. But I think we're daft if we don't pursue those things, because again, the quality of the job hopefully goes up with taking some of those kind of more administrative things away if we're assured that AI will do it properly in a way that works.
Councillor Ney?
Thank you, Chair. I was really impressed with the Care Leavers Help Group, and I was just wondering if we had any help from government on that, or is it totally from PCC money?
The Care Leavers Hub is funded by the Youth Investment Fund, So, yeah, almost entirely there's odd bits that have had to be because of the rules for the fund, but in the main government funded. Alongside, there's the same investment pot that is refurbishing a couple of the youth centres and Frederick Street.
But that was a deliberate choice to use it to fund a Care Leavers Hub. And I know that we put in a very good application, and I'm very excited about both the Care Leavers Hub and also the refurbishment of those 3 youth centres, which are going to be amazing.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of summarising some of the positives that we've heard, I've been pleased to hear about Mockingbird and the independent reviewing officers that we just heard about, and obviously the family hubs and the satellites that are going alongside that. I'm going to hand to Jake now in terms of the recommendations that are likely to come from this. So, councillors, if you've got some, we've heard some along the way, but if you can remember some of the things that have been said that we can put forward as recommendations, that would be useful. Jake?
Thank you, Chair. I've picked up 3 or 4. So I've got a report that shows how the service has improved the quality assurance process to be more explicit about the difference we are making for children and young people by discussing the 10 wishes then Vivian Lyons to speak with the participation member around ideas to engage with more young people. And then I've got social worker appraisals this summer. I think this is an action. Social worker appraisals this summer would discuss how they were learning about the views and aspirations of children and young people, and then in addition to the work programme in relation to AI.
And I picked up from Karen about councillors offering their time and skills, like a time bank thing. So we need to come back to make sure that happens. Does anybody have any other recommendations or actions from this item on the agenda? Councillor?
I'm really pleased just to read on the performance data that in 2024, the assessments are carried at the level of 44%, and 2025, by end of the March 2025, is in the region of 90%. So obviously the training is the key, as this report states. So I will just recommend to continue with this procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so we will move on to the next item. Do you want to leave at this point? Okay. Okay. Just going to take a two-minute break or so, just while we rearrange the furniture. Thank you very much, everybody. So item 7, the Youth Justice Annual Report. I'll hand over to Martine Aquilina for this, please.
I think I'm introducing it, Chair, if that's all right.
I'm ahead of myself, sorry.
And Chair, could we invite Sarah Wilson to the table? Sarah is the current head of service or service manager for the Youth Justice Service. So she's come to be part of the presentation of the report too.
Welcome, Sarah. And yes, Councillor Lang, I will give you your 5 minutes in the sun.
As the local authority responsible, Plymouth City Council is required, after consultation with partner agencies, to publish a youth justice plan each year outlining the composition of and funding for their youth justice service and the functions it is to carry out. The youth justice plan in Plymouth sits alongside the key local partnership strategies, the Safer Plymouth Partnership Community Safety Plan and the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Plan and the Children's Commissioning Strategy. The Youth Justice Plan sets out the governance arrangements and operation of the Plymouth Youth Justice Service. The Youth Justice Service continues to work with partners to ensure that we provide a first-class service to children and communities and maintain the levels of supervision, risk management and safeguarding which will protect the public and support children to stop offending. The Youth Justice Service sits within the wider Children, Young People and Families Service to ensure that we as a local authority provide a holistic response that actively supports early help and prevention services to those children who might be on the cusp of entering the criminal justice system as well as those who may have already committed offences and are in need of intensive services to prevent ongoing or recurring offences. We're really proud that we have a committed and proactive management board that oversees and monitors the Plymouth Youth Justice Service and ensures that there's a robust strategy to prevent and address crime and antisocial behaviour before and when it happens. The board delivers a partnership approach to delivering system-wide improvements, achieving better outcomes, and to ensure that the voice of children, young people and their families is central to planning and decision-making processes. This year's plan is the first year of our new three-year plan to improve the outcomes for the children that we work with in Plymouth and the wider community that we are serving. And over the coming 12 months, this plan has set out our priorities over this period. And you'll see in the plan that we talk about having an aspiration to be one of the very best youth justice services in the country. And I'm really convinced that we are very much on the way to achieving that. Thank you.
Martine, did you want to say anything in addition?
Thank you would be the first thing I would like to say. I thought I'd just have a couple of minutes just to sort of talk about some of the key achievements over the last year. We have seen some changes in our youth justice service with a long-standing service manager leaving and the introduction of Sarah joining us, which has brought us a very different way of working and a fresher face. Over the last years, our key achievements have been very much around our strengthening our early help and prevention. So for people who are aware of the Youth Justice Service, that's a pretty new approach for the Youth Justice Service, and often historically we've been forced to wait until children have offended and are open statutory orders before we can move into a space where we can provide support. And over the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen a real change to that. And that has had a really good impact on reducing the amount of children who are criminalised in this city, driving down our first-time entrants to a place where we're really proud of now. And whilst we saw a little increase over the last year as a result of some of the protests that took place this time last year, we are seeing that coming down again in a really good space. I did want to just note in the report that the Youth Justice board publishes its data and it's quite out of date, so there is elements within the text that we'll talk about are up to date data. So I think at the moment they're publishing around about 23, 24, so that's quite out of date. So we have unashamedly written in there what our actual data is because it is much lower. Achievements over the last year, I'm really proud of the work that the service do in relation to really building good, strong relationships with the children and families that we work with, and we are seeing the fruits of that in respect of young people not reoffending. Our reoffending rate has been consistently low and sustained at around about 14 to 16% throughout the year, and it continues to stay there. We are also really proud of the new process around victim support. So we were really aware that for some of our young people who are the perpetrators of offences, we provide a really good multidisciplinary service to those. But what we realised is we weren't actually doing the same for the victims of those offences, and so we've really built that over the last year, and we're proud of the work that our victim worker is now doing with those people who are victims. And we're also very proud of the work that we do to transition our young people, because children don't become adults. They aren't children 17 years, 364 days, and then adults at 17 years, 365 days. And we were really aware that there was a massive cliff edge for those young people who are spanning both youth justice service across to the probation service. And we worked really hard with probation to soften that transition for our young people who go from a very strong multidisciplinary wraparound service into an adult space which doesn't see the same support being levied to them. And I suppose the other thing that we had to do this year was transition our way from one case management system to another. As social workers and family practitioners, we're not great at technology, and I'm really pleased to say that we've managed that transition in a really good way. I suppose just thinking about moving forward, we are absolutely committed to continuing our Child First journey and embedding that across our service, but also now expanding that out to how our partners think about the children that we work with. And people will hear me talk about children all the time as a youth justice service. Our service works with children between the ages of 11 and 18, and they don't always like being called children, but it's done specifically to remind us that they are our children and they are not adults, and therefore should not be treated as adults in the criminal justice system. And we're really proud of how we hold ourselves to that and how we work with our partners to think, to help them think differently sometimes in this space.
Thank you. So, open to councillors' questions. Councillor Steve.
Thanks for that. I just have a question around disproportionality. So in the report, it mentions around how you've had progress on reduction in disproportionality due to ethnicity, and now you're going to be focusing on care experienced young people and children with SEND needs. It says that you're going to have that directed as a priority for the new plan. What is that going to look like? When is that going to come through? What's the timeline? What's the level of issue currently? What's the target you're trying to get to on that, particularly, like I say, with regards to care experienced young people?
Maybe could we hear from you, Sarah, first before we go to Martine? Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you. So we are bringing our SEND colleagues into the Youth Justice Board. So we welcome a member of our SEND team, and we have a speech and language therapist that's actually in our team at the moment. They're doing some great work with the magistrates and doing some training around how to engage young people into who are open to the youth justice service, but also coming into the youth justice for the first time. So it's about awareness sharing and also making sure that our plans talk to each other. In terms of a target, we are setting a board away day very soon. I think it's in September, where we are going to set those targets with our board members. So the management board will set the timescales for that, and we'll have some actions with our SEND colleagues through that board membership coming forward. I can't give you exact targets right now, sorry.
The other part is the work that we do. So one of the things we really realised is we don't have a member of the corporate parenting board on the Youth Justice Board. And just to put into context, our cohort of young people is very small. That's a brilliant thing. We don't want our cohort of children to be very big, and they're exceptionally small. And the last time I looked at our cohort of children, we had 16, only 16 children on a statutory order, 51 children on prevention work, and that's exactly the space we want to be in. We do not want our children open on statutory orders. So whilst we are talking about this and we are really high in aspiration, we are talking about very low numbers, but they are disproportionate. Last year we spent a lot of time focusing on on ethnicity, because we were at about 14.9% last year, disproportionality across that in that space, and that wasn't okay, given our school roll, I think at the point was about 9%. And so we knew that was a problem. So now we're just being extremely aspirational in thinking about then how do we do this differently. We do employ speech and language specifically on top of what we're offering from our health colleagues, because we know the importance of getting that language sort of delay and understanding that.
That's great. And you'll know this better than me, but we know that care experienced people are disproportionately represented in the prison population. So I'd be interested to hear about the actions you're taking for care experienced young people, because I think you covered SEND but not care experience.
We have a very good relationship with our child-centred policing team. So we currently have 2 young people in on remand in custody under the age of 18. We have more than that, but we don't hold that data in the Youth Justice Service across our over 18-year-olds. We challenge heavily on any decisions that are made in our alongside our police to think about how we work with our young people who are in care. We have a concordat that says very clearly that we don't criminalise our young people. So for those actions in residential care settings or in foster placements, that if you were a parent, you wouldn't report to the police, the expectation it remains the same for them. So we are, whilst there is a slightly higher and disproportionate amount of care experienced children in our youth justice service, it's not significantly higher, and I think that's because of the work that we've already done with our police, who are very thoughtful and mindful. Alongside Sarah, you can come back in and say if I'm saying anything different, but we are, and we challenge very strongly in that space in relation to those young people that are our young people.
We have a dedicated care experienced police officer in our child-centred policing team that we work with on a daily basis. So every single morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, we talk to that care experienced police officer about children in custody, children that have just entered custody, children that are missing, children that are entering the youth justice system. So that intelligence is shared on a daily basis between our youth justice service, our missing and exploitation team, our harmful sexual behaviour team, and the child-centred policing team. And that's consistent. That police officer hasn't changed since I've been imposed or for the 3 years that I've been working with adolescents in Plymouth, so it's a really strong partnership.
Councillor Lang.
So I think that meeting you're talking about is the DIB, isn't it? And I don't know if it's worth you saying a little bit about that and actually how it's been talked about as a kind of exemplar of best practice.
I'll come in there. It's my baby. So the daily intelligence briefing happens at 9:30 every morning. I think I might have just said 9 o'clock. At 9:30 every morning, it's a partnership meeting. It's a very closed meeting. It talks about every child in the last 24 hours who has been missing, maybe in Charles Cross, may have been missing for over 72 hours, so we need to keep an action log around that. And it also talks about our homeless presentation, so our 16 plus homeless children. And we know that children who present as homeless are more at risk of entering the criminal justice system and being exploited and all that extra familial harm that then can lead them to coming into care. So these are children that we really need to be talking about on a daily basis, and that we have daily actions with our partners. That includes education, CAMS. We've got other health colleagues in there. We've got drug and alcohol, substance misuse specialists in there, child-centred policing, care experienced, police officer. We have every team manager in each children's social care service attending, so all children that are known to all of our services are discussed. It's a quick half-an-hour meeting, which doesn't sound like we do a lot, but we absolutely do. We don't take those children off that tracker log until we've got an immediate action. We try to reduce the risk, we found them, and we've got a wraparound package for that child. It helps us share important, relevant information with all of those partners that are completely invested in our most vulnerable teenagers in the city, to make sure that they're seen, they have trusting relationships with people. We understand the reasons and the themes around why they're going missing and what they're experiencing. It's a really, really useful meeting. It comes from a model. I met with Bradford Children's Social Care about 3 or 4 years ago and lifted the model from there. We started off quite small. It was just police and us to begin with, and people didn't really understand how effective it would be, and now everyone seems to be talking about it and wants to be part of it and feels that it's a really good live action around our missing young people.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to move to Councillor Krzyznak.
Thank you. Reading this report, I'm a little bit concerned with a few things, which says that police is having less work to do with the justice, in a sense, reporting the cases to system. When we look back on page 51, the deprivation of the city is quite concerning. When you look on the page 52, it states of 151 upper tier local authorities in England, Plymouth ranks the 50th most deprived, with when looking at the average score summary measure compared to the other Southwest 11 official upper tier local authorities, Plymouth is in the second most deprived authority after Torbay. Now, when we look at the page 55, at the bottom of that page says Plymouth Youth Justice Service currently has an active caseload of 66 children, and court officers are working with 90 children who are either on the statutory orders or in need of harmful sexual behavior assessment and intervention. Now, these figures, looking at the police as a main focus of dealing with some issues and deprivation that we have there, what is the correlation between deprivation and the offences that are committed by the children? Is there anything to do with states in their homes, education? Because I strongly believe that there is quite a lot of pots of different influences that creates the environment for a child to be in a specific way. And I just would like to understand why these offences do happen and how we as a council can funnel the appropriate help to those children to get them out of that vicious circle that they find themselves in. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's going to pick that up? Sharon? Martin?
I suppose it's a really good question, and I think there's something about us understanding our data around where these children that we have open to youth justice are understanding their story more about how they're experiencing poverty. I think what it's important to remember is it is a small cohort of children out of that population, and so it should be. So these children are only coming in and going into court in front of the magistrates where it's a very, very, very serious crime. What we do well in Plymouth is early intervention and prevention, and those children may be committing very low-level crimes, antisocial behaviour, but we get in there with our families first, with our social workers and our family support workers to prevent them re-entering the system or escalating through the system. I don't know if you want to add to that, if that makes sense, Martin.
So as a service, it's a multidisciplinary service, and it's that for a reason, because what we recognise is that it's multifaceted, isn't it? So the reason people come to our attention is usually because they have suffered significant levels of harm in their own lives, and therefore we have to think about how we manage our manage their crime, because there has to be a consequence to whatever it is that they've happened, but within doing that, making sure that we are also addressing the underlying issues that are presented and have led to them then committing that crime. So we have a multidisciplinary team set up that sits around those young people and those children. But what's really important, and lots of my practitioners talk about this all the time, is that we can see a child 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, and sometimes their orders will mean that. But actually, if we don't address some of the underlying system issues that are going on for that family and think much more holistically, then we are never going to change that behaviour. And therefore, it's about the work we do with the children, the families. And so the Youth Justice Service sits amongst a wider targeted help service to make sure that we are not only addressing the behaviours of the child, but also addressing the reasons behind that behaviour and thinking with the family about how we do that and how we bring those around it. But we are very, very lucky in that we have had a senior leadership team actually that have been committed to allowing us to work in a much more preventative space for these young people, even when we lost some of the funding for the early help and prevention. As a local authority, David was very clear that we continued that work because the important bit is for us to get in there as early as possible to prevent this cycle of criminal behaviour, which is what we in Plymouth we do see sometimes.
Thank you. Quickly.
Yeah. Based on the figures that we have, how many of those children are with the mental health problems?
It's difficult to talk about mental health problems. It's what do we think a mental health problem is? I think that it often gets wrapped up with emotional and social and well-being problems as well. So we do have CAMS on site. I think we have 1.2 or 1.4, and I can never remember what the full-time equivalent is. So we have 2 CAMS workers who are there to address any mental health needs. But what I would really like to see in the future is coaching and like a bit of life coaching and mentoring, because sometimes I think for these young people it is more about their emotional well-being, and what they need is to build a really trusting relationship with someone, because they don't have that in their lives, and actually that is what they require to be wrapped around them. So we have to be really careful that we address. Sometimes things get wrapped up in mental health problems when actually there are other factors that are happening that are influencing that young person and the behaviour that they're doing. So we really try hard to think much more widely to think about what their needs are, and equally sequence the support that they receive. Otherwise, for children, I think the young man said today about having floods of professionals involved with them can sometimes actually be more negative than having that one trusted relationship with a sort of a key worker that can really be there for them at all times and be available and be persistent. Because what we know about our adolescent young people is they don't always want an adult in their life, and sometimes we just have to keep knocking on the door and saying we're still here. So and that persistence does pay off. We've seen that with our data. It does pay off in relation to getting through and being able to address some of the issues that we see.
Thank you. That's a really helpful answer. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. On page 64, on the risk and issues, we highlight youth violence, and we state that there will promote a youth violence champion who will link directly with Plymouth's Community Safety Partnership to influence and deliver programmes in schools addressing attitudes to violence and victims of serious harm. Now, whenever I read council reports that use phrases like having a champion and influence, there's always a risk, and I'm sure this is not the intention, that it isn't possibly as meaningful as it could otherwise be. So could you just explain to us precisely how does the youth violence champion influence, and what intervention will they actually be doing?
It's another one of my babies, yeah. So thank you. So we have one of our youth justice workers has just moved over to the OPCC. So we have a youth violence worker that's working with the Police and Crime Commissioner already, that's transitioned from our team over there. What we will have is a dedicated youth justice practitioner who will have a remit to link in with that OPCC worker and with our Safer Communities and Prevent Crime subgroup, so we can scope out the need for that worker across the city. So we will target certain schools, we will do programmes with our Safer Communities colleagues, and we will build on that. At the moment, we don't know the scope. We don't know that person only came into post with OPCC last week. They joined our management board this Monday for the very first time, which is really positive. They've made contacts with our child-centred policing team as well. So I understand what you mean by the name champion. It can sound a bit tokenistic at times, but I think what we've got is a real buy-in and a really good, strong relationship with the OPCC worker. And our Safer Communities are already leading on serious youth violence, and as part of our Prevent Crime subgroup, we just need to make sure that we make those links and we start targeting certain schools and areas alongside with our detached youth teams as well, so that we can put those programmes together. It can't just be a one service operation. It has to be multifaceted, doesn't it, with other people, our neighbourhood teams and our policing teams as well, to make sure that we're scoping that out to the right target areas and we've got the right programmes developed.
Thank you very much. So drawing this to a close, we've heard some really positive things about strengthening early help and prevention, about using the most current data to celebrate our successes, looking at the reoffending rate in particular and victim support, and using the tracker log with the most vulnerable young people. So we've had a really good positive picture, and it's been really useful to have that report. Thank you very much, Martine, and your team. Do we have any recommendations or actions coming out of this item rather than just noting the report? Which of course we will do, but let's be a bit more active than that. Councillor Nay?
Thank you, Chair. I think the next time we discuss this, we'd like to know more about the reoffending figures. I think that would be very interesting to see, you know, if there's any improvement on that, or if it, you know, what they actually are, the true figures.
Thank you. Jake, do you have anything else that you've picked up from the questions that we've had?
So, Chair, pick up on Councillor Steele's questions about disproportionality, and just provide some further information about that, including a deeper analysis, which the board has asked for. So it will be doing one piece of work once, and it can be used in a number of places. So there'll be a deeper analysis of that. And then we can also present what the board will sign off in early September in relation to the action plan for disproportionality. Bearing in mind the context, as Martina said, you know, these are small numbers, but nevertheless, it's potentially even more important, actually, in relation to that. And I would be interested, and it isn't reflected perhaps sufficiently in this report, about gender and girls. There's a little bit, but I'd be interested to know, you know, how girls really feature and how we might be adapting our services to meet the needs of groups of children and young people, perhaps a bit more specifically than in this current report.
Thank you. So moving on to item 8, the performance scorecard. Can I hand over to Councillor Lang and Councillor Cresswell to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an overview of how our services are performing across 2 main areas: children, young people, and family services, and education participation and skills. The data covers the period ending March 2025 and benchmarks our performance against national and regional averages where it's possible to do that. And this report helps us understand where we're making progress, where challenges remain, and how we can continue to improve outcomes for Plymouth's children and families. So section 1 is around children, young people and family services, and there were just a few things I wanted to highlight. So Plymouth processed 2,848 referrals in the 12 months to March 2025, which is down from 3,879 the previous year. However, re-referral rates have increased to 26.9%, which is 6.8 percentage points higher than last year, and above both national and statistical neighbour averages, which we think very clearly indicates that families may need more sustained support. 361 children were subject to child protection plans, which one of the measures we use is per 10,000, so that's 69.5 per 10,000, which is significantly higher than both the England average, which is 41.6, and our statistical neighbours, which is 54.4. And this represents an increase from 299 children in 2023-24, which suggests growing safeguarding pressures. 530 children are in our care, were in our care at the end of March, and that's up from 513 last year, with 44.2% placed outside Plymouth. Approximately 13% of our children live outside of Devon and Cornwall. And we can give some more detail about what outside Plymouth means, but that can mean, you know, Ivy Bridge or Saltash. So 13% of our children are not in Devon and Cornwall, and that speaks to some of the work we're doing around our trying to create our own residential provision here, so we can hopefully bring some of those children who really should be in Plymouth back to Plymouth. It's really important that we do that. The council's working to develop more local fostering capacity. We talked a little bit about that earlier, and the residential provision that I mentioned, to keep children closer to home, because sometimes it won't be appropriate for a child to be in Plymouth. They will need to not be in the city, but for most children it's where their support networks are, and we want to be able to keep them near to those. 7% of care experienced young people were in unsuitable accommodation, which means 93% is unsuitable, which is lower than both national 12% and regional 12.4 averages, demonstrating that we're doing effective work around preparation for independent living, but 7% is still too much, and we are working very hard to continue to reduce that, because we really don't want any of our young people to be in what is deemed unsuitable accommodation. I'll hand over to Sally now.
Thank you, Jemima. Thank you, Chair. So Section 2 deals with education, participation and skills. So firstly, 90.8% of Plymouth schools are rated good or outstanding by Ofsted, with particularly strong performances in primary schools, 94.2% versus 91.6% nationally, and secondary schools performing above the national average of 84.2% versus 83.8%. And as you'll probably be aware, and it says in the report, that as from September 2024, there were no longer 1 or 2 word overall judgments as far as schools are concerned. And one of the interesting things is to read a much more sort of like holistic analysis of schools as far as Ofsted is concerned. And it's very encouraging to read some of the very positive Ofsted comments that are coming out as far as our Plymouth schools are concerned. School absence rates remain above the national levels at 7.9% compared to 7.1% nationally, with persistent absence affecting 18.8% of pupils, and children with special educational needs face particular challenges with 38.2% persistent absence. We are doing a lot of work as far as the place-based plan is concerned, and looking at a particular piece of work and research that's going to go on in the new term, looking specifically at transitions, not just transitions from year 6 to year 7, but also those transitions that happen from year into year 3, and also the transitions that happen between year 5 and 6. One of the things that is pretty well established is that you need to try and work hard to prevent absence and to identify those children who are at risk of absence before it actually happens, because once they become absent, it's much more difficult to actually bring them back in. So again, it's that early intervention and early identification so as to keep those children in school. 46.3% of children achieve strong passes in English and maths at GCSE level, above the national average of 46.2%. The average attainment 8 score of 46.2% also exceeds national, regional, statistical neighbour averages, showing strong academic progress, and it will be good to see as well as soon as possible the results when they come out in August, and hopefully there'll be lots of options for celebrating the performance of our young people and seeing the progress that is being made. So look forward to those results in August. And then the one I want to bring your attention to is 92.3% of 16 to 7-year-olds were in education, employment or training, with particularly strong performance for young people with special educational needs at 91%, demonstrating effective support for vulnerable groups transitioning to adulthood. And there has been a lot of work that's specifically gone in with supporting our children with special educational needs, and our supported internships, and I'll probably mention that again a bit later on. But there's some positive work that's going on. There's always more to do. There's always more to do in education, but I think there are some positives to pick up and to celebrate there. Thank you.
Thank you to you both. Are there any questions from councillors at this point? Any feedback from officers before I go to councillors? Okay, Councillor Noble.
On the school attendance figures, in the description, it talks about children on a focus for the remaining academic year will look towards tightening up reporting processes and the length of time pupils spend on part-time timetables. I understand that if a child, children on those part, it's a child that only attends for part of the day, it might be the limit of their ability, or how they're accommodated in the school. But say they only attend for the morning, if they don't stay after lunchtime, that goes down as some kind of absence for the afternoon. So obviously it looks like they're absent, but they're actually attending all the time that they've been scheduled to go to school for whatever reason. How is that split out of the figures so it doesn't make either figures look worse, or be used as a thing that masks other absence issues?
So we can't cut children who are on part-time timetables out of the absence figures because it is an absence. So all children are entitled to a suitable full-time education. And if they can attend school, then they should be in school. So it's just counted as an absence. If children are too ill to attend school, then when they're absent, then they would be it would be recorded as an illness absent. So for some children, for example, they may be medically unable to attend school for a whole day. So their attendance in the morning would be marked as an attendance, but then in the afternoon they may be too ill, so they could be marked as an I. It just depends on the circumstances of the child, but you can't, I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we were to try and take out absence that was related to a part-time timetable, because that wouldn't give us a true picture of what's going on in the city. The ambition for us is to really reduce the numbers of part-time timetables in the city so that we improve absence. And there's work that's going on with schools and internally to start thinking about how we can bring those numbers down to make sure we're supporting children to have a part-time table where it's only ever as a last resort and when nothing else will do for that child. So that's the piece of work that's happening at the moment. And we're also improving our recording. So the issue around the duration of part-time timetables is being addressed through really active tracking of children on part-time timetables. So we're starting to see that come down.
Can I ask, is that as part of the role of the virtual school?
So no, it kind of sits across lots of different teams within the local authority. So the SEND service are actively working around supporting children who may be on part-time timetables to review their EHCP to make sure that their needs can be met in school and there isn't a need for a part-time timetable for a child with an EHCP. So that work happens. The virtual school, there are children in care who are on part-time timetables, and that work happens to make sure that that's for, really time limited and only usually for reintegration purposes, so quick and snappy to get that child back into school, accessing full-time education. From an inclusion perspective, we hold all of that data, if you like, around all children on part-time timetables. So we'll have attendance officers working with schools around and asking questions about children who may be on part-time timetables for more than 6 weeks, because the Department for Education are really clear, part-time timetables shouldn't be for more than 6 weeks. And then we're also, we've launched a regular review, a fortnightly review of all children on part-time timetables for more than 6 weeks, with a particular focus on children which are open to social care. To make sure that we don't have children on child protection plans who are on part-time timetables, and to also make sure that we're working closely with social workers to ensure that educational outcomes are being prioritised by us all across our children's service and with schools, to make sure that children are in school, because school, we know, is a protective factor.
Thank you. Councillor McNamara?
Thank you, Chair. The figures for the young people in education, employment and training are impressive and growing ever more so. I just worry that they're being massaged a little bit. Are all these courses that children are on, do they have to be full-time, or if they rock up for half a day a week, does that get them off the books? Are they all working towards recognised qualifications?
Well, there would be. We've had a particular piece of work that has been done in terms of young people who have who have special educational needs, and therefore we've had what's been supported internships, and we've had a growing number of employers, colleges and such who have actually been participating, in fact, in those, offering opportunities for those young people so that they are able to achieve and go on work-wise. One of the things I would sort of illustrate, and I think I'm fair in saying so, is that Discovery College in particular has been very successful with those young people who they have been supporting and who have gone on then to being in permanent actual going into employment afterwards. So it's been a really, it's kind of producing something which is sort of tailor-made, and we've got more and more skillful, if you like, officers have got more and more skillful, and in order to make sure, because what you really want to make sure with those young people is you don't want to throw them into something in which they're set up, in fact, to fail, especially if they've had challenges, they've got special needs or whatever. You want to make sure that you actually have that supportive environment, supportive employers, supportive places in college or whatever, so that that young person can actually succeed. And I think it's probably fair to say that that's what we've been doing and trying to achieve, and we have certainly had some success. I think we now need to look as well now, particularly at our children who are our care leavers, and be able to also have the same sort of success as well with our care leavers as well. I think if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
I think you've mentioned it all, Councillor Cresswell, but I guess just to summarise, it's a very bespoke offer, so it starts with where the young person is, but it remains very aspirational. So from that point earlier about, you know, if the aspiration is to attend university, well, that's the track collectively we'll work on, but it could be that it's tiny steps towards, you know, a qualification or a job. So everything is very bespoke, which is what takes the time. But we feel very strongly that's the right thing to do. So we hold on to that aspiration, you know, and as good, if it's for our care leavers or our children in care, we're good corporate parents as we would for our own, and nudge them and, you know, challenge. But it starts with where they are now and says, how can we get you to the next step? So I hope that helps to answer.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Every time I come to this committee, I mention data and timescales. One of the single most important factors that's affected children in the last 80 years since the war was COVID. All the data I have presented to me is the picture post-COVID. There's no comparison between what it was like before COVID and after. So, for example, on 92, number of children subject to a care plan, it's ever so slightly going up from 490 to 530 over that period. But I don't know if pre-COVID, if that was at 250, was there a stonking great change? I'd love to have a longer picture so we can see a true comparison of what it was like pre and post-COVID, please. And if we can put that as a recommendation or something, that'd be great.
Pick that up and we can put that in the next performance report. I wouldn't want to be tracking back all the time in every report on that, but for a particular point in time, we can do a report, and I can ask the performance analyst to do that, to track back over a period of time, which will then factor in the impact of COVID, pre and post-COVID, on some of the key data.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on, but before we move on to the next item, I will just tell Scrutiny that at the last Send Improvement Board, I invited Rob Williams to come to a future Scrutiny to talk about a really exciting project with head teachers in Plymouth about predictive risk model for attendance, because looking at this performance scorecard, it's really positive, but attendance sticks out massively as being the major concern, and we have to get a grip on that. So we will invite Rob to come and talk about that, and I hope be really energised in terms of addressing those issues. Having said that, can we look at recommendations following this report? Jake?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to note Councillor Wood's recommendation around data, and that's the one I've captured.
I would say that if you've got somebody on attendance, I think that would be quite useful. There seems to be quite a bit of information and like data about how that attendance figure comes about, because there's all sorts of systems input to the that's why it includes some things and it doesn't include others, and so I think that maybe if there's some information about some of that, so when we get to the discussing it, we're all on the same page, whether we did a bit of training or something on that beforehand, or things, some basic crib sheet about what that might be a good thing.
You do that, Chair, in terms of just following this meeting, just send a briefing note out regarding attendance and picking up on the attendance data and just providing an explanation of that. And then should you wish to have a proper agenda item and discussion focused on attendance, well, you've said it, we're going to have one, because we're going to have Rob come. So we'll do a report which sets out what our position is as far up to date as we can in relation to city attendance across primary and secondary schools for that meeting, so that we've got a well-informed discussion.
Councillor Nay?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Noble's touched on something that's really important. We could do with a table of maybe information for absences, what the reason is for absences as well, so it's something we could look at pinpointing. Some of the reasons poverty, bus fares, is some of the reasons they're looking after other children at home and the parents are working? That would be something we could meaningfully look at improving.
I suggest that because I'm very conscious of time now, our health colleagues on the screen, but if we don't answer that now, but we'll put some of that in the briefing note that we'll send out following this meeting, and then more detail in the fuller report when we discuss it at scrutiny. Thank you.
If you'd like, once the briefing's been provided, so that you're providing the overview of attendance and how that information is captured, if you would like me to run a Q&A session, then I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Councillor Lang?
I wanted to mention, sorry Sally, you probably were going to say this, but in terms of people maybe who are new to the board, who might not understand the or have much knowledge of the landscape in terms of how many local authority schools we have, how many multi-academy trusts, how we all have to work together to sort this attendance problem, which is a wicked issue, which is talked about here, which is talked about in all our improvement boards. I think maybe including something in the briefing around the education landscape in Plymouth would be helpful for understanding all the players who need to work together to get to grips with this.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are moving on to item 9 and welcome our health colleagues on the screen without pictures at the moment, so that's better. Thank you very much. So we welcome Tracy, Hannah and David to our meeting. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Creswell to introduce the report, and then we'll have questions from councillors. Before we do that, Councillor Creswell, Councillor Noble has a point.
So just a point of order. Might mention my employer, Plymouth Hospitals NHS Trust.
Councillor Creswell.
So the purpose of this paper is to update on progress, challenges and next steps in delivering the SEND Local Area Improvement Plan, developed following the 2023 SEND inspection and aligned with the 2023-2026 SEND strategy. So at the moment, some key achievements: the governance and co-production. We've had strengthened governance and accountability, embedding co-production with families, young people through the 10 Wishes framework, which I have a copy of here. Communication of the new SEND duty system significantly improved call rates and reduce inbox backlogs. Educational healthcare plans timelines. Issuances of EHCPs has doubled with improved adherence to statutory 20-week timescales now progressing. the targeted funding model, which is a new funding model in mainstream school, which supports over 300 learners who aren't in receipt of educational healthcare plans. And early monitoring is actually demonstrating impact, and we've had some really positive feedback from heads and SENCOs. Health services, investments in autism, speech and language services, and improved access to CAMS, that's the child and adolescent mental health services, and early help pathways. The preparation for adulthood, which I've mentioned previously, but we've got 67 supported internships with 100% employment and training outcomes, and that's been nationally recognised for best practice we received last month a local government Chronicle award. And the elective home education monitoring links between exclusions, EHE, elective home education, and proactive support to reintegrate children into schools. When we talk about attendance, it's actually one of those really wicked issues, and you can't look at it in isolation. It's, as Councillor Ney has said, it's related to all sorts of issues. It's tied up as well when you start to look at attendance, looking at elective home education. These are not easy problems and challenges to solve. And I'm just going to quickly mention as well, what we have in place is the Plymouth GATI, which is notice I have several visual aids with me, which is the graduate approach to inclusion. It's an electronic tool to support inclusion, supporting teachers, school leaders, and also advice and such for parents. And I think it's fair to say that the GATI has also been shortlisted in an award. Is it the Nasson Award? Right, which is going to take place on the 3rd of October, I believe. So challenges. The ongoing pressures on specialist placements and independent special educational needs provision. The rising demand for neurodiversity assessments and also for speech and language therapy. The increasing numbers of children who I've just briefly mentioned on elective home education, or, as we've just discussed, part-time timetables. And this is another big national issue, is the shortage of educational psychologists, both locally and nationally. In fact, I was discussing this very thing today. So the next steps is to finalise and implement the next phase of the SEND action plan, to prepare for an Ofsted re-inspection with evidence, collation, and most of all, impact. We've done these things, so what? That's really important. Targeted plan for reduced timetables, elective home education, and also emotionally based school non-attenders as well. Continue reducing the elective home EHCP backlog, and improve the annual review timelines as well. Expand early help and waiting well offers, and evaluate and begin co-producing what will be the 2026-2029 SEND strategy. So that's my introduction, and I hand over to Lisa.
I would probably just like to add about the partnership, which has been commended. We've come on a considerable journey since the inspection in July 23, and it's one that has been done through really strong partnership, and it's great that we have our colleagues here this evening and we're all here together from the ICB, from Live Well, and from University Hospitals Plymouth. And it's been really commended within our DFE stocktake and with all the review work and the governance that we've gone through, that we have made good progress in response to the inspection. We've actioned most of the improvement plan, and we're now in the stages of gathering evidence. Hopefully you'll see in the report that there are lots to celebrate, there's lots to really commend, but there's also recognition of the work that we've still got to do, and we'll continue to do that in strong partnership as we have great aspirations for our children and young people with SEND across the city. I'm happy to take questions, and I know colleagues on the screen are happy to take any questions around the health sector as well.
Thank you. And I'm conscious I didn't check to make sure that you could hear us when I welcomed you. But
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
kind of waved their hands at me, so I guess you can. Is there anything that you would like to say? I'll start with you, David, in terms of information to the committee before we go to questions.
Thank you. So I think just to reiterate that I feel like there's been a significant amount of work done across a range of actions that really has been in partnership. We've had some some significant progress made last year. There are some real challenges still ahead of us about being able to respond to what the new level of demand is, and I'd reflect on the comment made about what the systems look like post-COVID. The health world looks very different post-COVID. There's a much larger number of children and young people that are being referred for assessment now than had been before the pandemic. So we're having to adapt and change, but I feel like the process we've gone through together has been very constructive. We've been able to make significant change, and we're working hard now on being able to evidence the impact of the things that we've done.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Tracy?
So I would echo what's already been said, certainly from a partnership perspective. I think we've really developed our partnership in Plymouth. I don't think we can underestimate how strong our partnership is. Certainly when we're you speak to colleagues and we're in contact with each other a lot across the system. I would also echo David's comment around the increase in demand we've seen right across health since COVID, and we can map that back when we look at numbers of requests for help and referrals that have come in. And I think the graduated response, we've done lots of work in partnership around that. We've got our I Thrive model within health, which is a reflection of the graduated response, and it's really supporting parents and young people to be able to access service, and we've had some really good feedback from families and young people.
Thank you. And Hannah?
I don't have very much to add. I just want, and I agree with everything that's been said. I wanted to say that I think the because there is national recognition that the SEND system is very challenged at the moment, inspectors in recent experience don't necessarily expect to see that we've got absolutely everything right, but they do expect us to be able to demonstrate a partnership, a strong partnership, understanding of where our challenges remain and a plan that we can deliver on those. And one of the things that I think has been done really well in Plymouth, that we've all been a part of, is that we haven't just focused on the things that came up in the SEND inspection, but have looked much more holistically at our whole SEND system and responded to that in a more robust way. So we've been dynamic about re-diagnosing ourselves. I know that's a very health word, but re-diagnosing ourselves and understanding where we need to respond next. And we've done that on a very evidence-based approach, understanding the experience of our children and families, and also the numbers that sit behind it. And I think that's really important context for where we are today and also what we do next.
Thank you very much. Questions from councillors at this point, please? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing that I want to say is, as having been a councillor for over 10 years now, but also having worked for 2 of the MPs in the city, the communication since Lisa particularly came into the service has improved dramatically, and you can see from the communication element with the SEND duty stuff, it genuinely has been like night and day compared to how it was previously. And I think it's really important that we recognise that. I know it's not simply down to Lisa, but her leadership, I think, has really dramatically changed the communication with MPs and councillors. So thank you for everything that you've done to do that. And now I'm going to ask you a difficult question in exchange for that. So I'm a big fan of prevention, spending our money wisely early on. So I'd like to ask about SEND tribunals. So my understanding is that the largest majority of appeals on EHCP decisions are refusals to assess, and of those, a vast majority rule in favour of the parent on appeal. So this suggests to me that we're maybe not getting it right first time in a lot of cases, and that if we did, it would save us a lot of time and money, but more importantly, it would save a lot of children and their parents a huge amount of stress. And perhaps if we had even better communication and maybe a focus on mediation, that might be more effective and produce better outcomes for parents and for children. So how does that fit into your ongoing improvements to communication?
Yeah, it's a tricky area to discuss, isn't it? Because parents have their right to appeal based on the decisions. I would say that our governance processes are much more robust now in terms of the decisions that we're making. We've got a really great multi-agency team who make those decisions, and that includes representation from the education sector, from our health sector, social care, educational psychologists chair that panel, and the SEND team sort of bringing in that perspective. What we're doing to strengthen the way in which we process those things is when there is a yes or a no to assessments, those decisions now are given to the families and given to the schools and any partners involved within 24 hours of that decision. And previously there'd been some time, extensive amount of time. Those decisions are made now 95% we were last month within 6 weeks, and 100% within 7 days of the 6 weeks. So there's a much faster turnaround, whereas before that the timeliness was at around 20%. So there was lots of families waiting. So we're now in the next phase of what happens when there's a no. And understanding that when there is a no, it's because as a team looking at that, we really genuinely believe that there are things in place within the school that will be able to support the young person, and an education, health and care plan isn't needed for that support to be in place, because we now have a range of funding options. We have a range of resources that are within our mainstream schools. We funded a large amount, you'll see within the paper, targeted funding of 30 schools that go live in September, for children without an education, health and care plan to access alternative curriculum pathways across primary and secondary. And so what we're doing is we're calling families and having those discussions. We're moving into the next phase in September, where there'll be then a team meeting with the family and the school or the setting, and bringing in the families first within that when we feel there might be some support for the family, to have that discussion live, so we can talk about what happens next. Because the worst thing for a family is to receive a letter just saying no. It used to be no, follow the graduated approach, which means very little to a family when new within the system. But actually, here's a meeting where we can all really discuss. So, what does this mean for your child? And I would say, because we've been doing lots of mediation, we've been doing lots of triage when there are no's to assessment. It's shifting in terms of the tribunals, and we are having more now for Section I, which is names of placements of schools, when a family really want a particular school and there are no placements. So we are seeing more of that within our tribunals rather than the refusal to assess. So those are the things we are putting into place.
Councillor Creswell?
Yes, I want to reiterate that whole big thing about communication. I think we've talked about, and we've all talked about partnerships, but that communication is absolutely so key, so important. I think the other thing is worthwhile mentioning as well is the amount of work we have been doing with our families and the work that we've done on co-creation. I think that's been really important, and that's potentially a real game changer. And coming back as well to the targeted funding model, in which the problem we have is that an educational healthcare plan isn't a panacea and is going to, what you actually want to do is you actually want to have an intervention, targeted work, which actually supports the child and helps that child to move forward, and that parents and carers can see that it is having an impact. So I think that is also so important. And the other thing I did want to briefly mention is the work, in fact, of our special schools. Our special school head teachers are doing a lot of work to actually support our mainstream schools with expertise, etc. And I'm sure that that Lisa could actually add a bit more to that, but very much welcome the sort of fantastic work that's been going on as far as our special schools have been concerned, in order to support our mainstream colleagues.
Councillor Creswell's referring to the outreach offer. So we've got 3 of our schools at the moment involved in that. So they work with small groups or larger cohorts, a whole school or individual children, and they look at how actually the young person can be supported or the group of children can be supported, and then how that can then improve the practice across the whole of the mainstream. The impact report on that was really incredibly strong, where we could show that young people had re-engaged within their curriculum. Families felt really happy and, you know, supported by the outreach. And it's just one element of the graduated approach, because we've really focused on what does the targeted level look like before an EHCP. So what resource was needed in schools, what support and guidance and help was needed, and that's all part of the graduated approach which Councillor Creswell showed. And if you go under the targeted tab on that web page, you'll see all of the new things and kind of the wraparound schools, young people and families to really support them at the right time. And they're all really new things and new initiatives that weren't in place before. So we can say this is what's available to you to help.
I think it just goes to show that that's why communication is so important, because I think a lot of parents feel perhaps if they don't receive the decision that they want on an EHCP that means their child will not get support, and actually that's not what that means. And if there's another way to provide it, then that's great. Which leads me into potential recommendation, Chair, around the government obviously bringing forward potential plans around what the future of SEND and in particular EHCPs look like in the autumn. And I think as a committee we need to track that work actually, and I'd be very keen to hear very early on your view as professionals as to what those changes might mean and what they look like, and specifically how we can communicate as a local authority with parents to ensure that there isn't fear based on media speculation as to what may come, but instead a reasoned and practical approach to things that might come forward, the influence that parents can have and the voice that they can have on behalf of their children as part of that process, and how we as a committee can feed into that to make sure that the actual voices of kids in Plymouth are heard at a much higher level.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Really excellent questions. Thank you so much for that. And I think the other thing, I know Lisa wanted to talk as well, so that communication with families is absolutely key to us. And we believe that families lead us, you know, we work together. So we're really upping the ante. The team already do, and I try and attend wherever possible as well. We already run sessions, live sessions with families. You may be aware of that. So we're going to increase those based on the changes coming in, just to keep us all steady in just the way you describe. So every 2 weeks we're going to run online sessions as well, so that there's a real opportunity for our families to ask us anything. And what we try and do from that is offer a written response as well, within a given time frame, so that any questions we get, and our fabulous Parent Carer Council keep us really steady with that as well, and really come alongside and support us. But you're absolutely right, communication is absolutely key. And I think the whole theme here is confidence, isn't it? If you feel confident that you're going to get the help your child needs, you won't necessarily rely on the EHCP, but people seek it for whatever, because they might need it, but because they're feeling that's going to get me help. So what we want to say is you're going to get help if you need it anyway.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Krisenak?
I have a quick question. Definition of home elective education.
So home education is where the parents provide a suitable full-time education which is suitable to the child's age, ability and aptitude. Okay, so parents can elect. So a child's education, it doesn't really say how it has to be delivered in terms of, the law. It can be at school or education otherwise. So elective home education falls under education otherwise, essentially. But it's all on the parent to provide that education. So sometimes there's confusion from families thinking that they may get some financial support with delivering the home education, or that they may have some tuition coming into the home. But if they want those things, if they would like a tutor, they have to pay for that themselves. They assume full responsibility for providing their child's education, but they can do that in a whole variety of ways.
Supplementing, you said parents design education. Does that mean that they design the plan of education? They have nothing to do with the school?
So they have nothing to do with the school. The child's not on a school roll. A school doesn't provide resources to the parent to complete with their child. It's for the parent to decide the way in which they will educate their child. They don't have to follow the national curriculum, but the child has to receive a suitable education which equips them for what they would like to do in their later life. That's
Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Chair. The figure of 848 for children in elective home education, to me as a layman, seems bonkers. That's like a whole school not in school. I was wondering, and this relates to Councillor Wood's point about data, do you know what these figures were like before COVID, before austerity? Are they going up? Are they dropping?
So the numbers have gone up significantly since COVID. They've been going up steadily for years, but it's really challenging because there's a cumulative effect of children moving into home education, then not going back to school, and then there are also rising numbers of children moving into home education. So it's a challenge, but we have supported. It's been brilliant because this year we have supported 187 electively home educated children back to school, which is a record for us. So that's really brilliant, and our schools have been extremely welcoming of supporting children who are electively home educated back into school. And we've also, for children that have needed to return to school because they're missing education, and we've issued 18 school attendance orders, again looking at how we can support children who are missing education back into school.
Can I just add a bit to that, and choosing as well sort of key times when you might be able to bring children back into school, key sort of like positions where changing year group or key sort of like key stage areas, key stage transfer or whatever. I think increasingly we've been working, haven't we, in order to try and first of all to prevent children becoming electively home educated, because sometimes what happens is there can be some sort of conflict or something happens, and it can go from being sort of like there to up there, and it comes back to communication again, that communication, that working with the parent or whatever and the family to try and bring things down, come back to calm, and so keep that child within school. So a lot of work going on. And what's really important is that most importantly of all is our children, our schools need to be places where children feel that sense of belonging and wanting to be in school. A big push by the government is about achieving and thriving, and belonging is a key element of our place-based approach. And all of those things tie up together, that sense of belonging, that sense of attendance, achieving, enjoyment in school, safeguarding, all of those things are really important. And we want our children to feel that great sense that they really belong in school and they belong in their communities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am going to move us on. I'd like to say thank you to our three colleagues on the screens. Thank you for your contribution. What I've heard is a number of keywords. I like celebrating success in terms of the awards, but I heard partnership, particularly with our health colleagues. Also between special schools and the mainstream schools as being very important. And the partnership with parents and getting that better in terms of explaining the process, and that a no isn't the end of the process, it's just a different answer and they need to work in a different way with the school. So thank you for that, and I know that this is an area we'll come back to. Jake, do we have, apart from Councillor Taylor's very long recommendation earlier, do we have any others?
No, Chair, that was it.
Okay. We only need one, you're absolutely right. Thank you very much to our colleagues. So moving on to item 10, it's the SEND Capital Programme. I'm handing over to Councillor Creswell to present the report.
It's me again. Right. So at the heart of our SEND strategy is that children in our city experience, come back to that word, that deep sense of belonging, and that wherever possible and appropriate, they are enabled to attend school close to their home alongside their neighbours, their friends and their peers. We believe that the best use of our SEND capital is to create environments that support this strategy and ultimately provide learning environments in which children can thrive. And the importance of learning environments is well evidenced. For example, the lauded Reggio Emilia approach, in which the founder of this education philosophy emphasised the environment as the third teacher. It's designed to provoke curiosity, collaboration and exploration. The physical space is seen as a living system that communicates with children and supports their learning through aesthetics, organisation and accessibility. There is also reference in the built environment as the fourth teacher through a study presented at the Interior Design Educators Council conference. This explores how classroom design, especially for children with autism, can support learning and emotional regulation. It's argued that the built environment plays a critical role in shaping behaviour and engagement, effectively acting as a fourth teacher. And going back to my own experience as a teacher, the environment for all children is really important, but it is particularly important for those children who have additional needs. So this report provides high-level detail of the SEND capital available to us and the commitments we have already made to enhancing children's learning environments. It also demonstrates that we have a clearer understanding of children's needs and can now describe the kind of environments we need to build or expand upon and to maximise the capital that we have. Whilst we are working deeply with our education community to continuously improve inclusion, we also recognise that some children require specialist provision in order to thrive. Our strategy is designed to help manage the wide spectrum of need, whilst acknowledging the most pressing being a need for maintained specialist provision. The government is taking several steps to increase maintained specialist education places. There's been a major investment in specialist education with 740 million capital funding that's been allocated to create 10,000 new SEND spaces. This includes expanding specialist units within mainstream schools, adapting classrooms to be more inclusive, and building new places in special schools. The funding is part of a broader 6.7 billion education capital settlement aimed at improving school infrastructure and access. There's also a focus on inclusion and early support, with the government aiming to support more children with SEND in mainstream settings while maintaining specialist schools for complex needs. And as you've probably heard already, we're a bit sort of ahead of the curve on this in terms of some of the work that we've been doing. A neurodivergence task and finish group led by Professor Karen Goldberg has been established to advise on inclusive practices and support for neurodivergent pupils. The Department for Education is encouraging councils to use capital funding to create places in local mainstream schools, reducing reliance on expensive independent provision. And we feel, as I've already said, that we are ahead of the curve with the approaches that we have made so far. Thank you, Chair.
Amanda, is there anything else you'd like to add? Questions, please, councillors? Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Chair. There's 205 children in independent specialist placements at an average cost of 68,000. Could you let us know how wide the spread is? I mean, are they all nearly 68,000 or some quite cheap?
Yeah, there's quite a wide spread. The most expensive are around 98,000, and then our cheapest is down in the 50s, so 54, 55,000.
Councillor Taylor and then Krizanek.
Thank you, Chair. Capital funding and buildings in particular. So I want to ask a question based on what's happening around Milford School, and it's less about Milford and more about backup plans. So were one of our special schools that may physically not be in a very good state, the building, to have an issue which would prevent children from accessing it for long periods of time, what would happen to those children? Where would their alternative provision be? And how much may that cost the local authority in an emergency situation?
It's okay, Councillor. So I don't think we're in that position. There's lots of work going on to support the school now and make sure it's absolutely fit for purpose for the pupils. So that work is underway. We actually, as well as part of our strategy, already developed a satellite to the school as well, which is a brand new provision. So I don't think it's going to get to that point. Because of the work we're doing together, both with the school and with other colleagues around who are supporting us, holding the school really steady and really well. And we're working on a longer term solution now at pace for those children.
But what if it did, or at any school, and not just Milford? What would happen? What burden would that place on the local authority financially in terms of emergency alternative education for such a large number of children with SEND?
I think it would place a burden. We have excellent partnerships, and what I would say is our own education community are brilliant in the way we've seen with the satellite provision for Milford, and we're already doing that work where we're looking at how can we build, how can we use our existing estate to expand for specialist needs. So I think that's kind of covered in the paper. So I think it would place a burden, but we're already working at pace on alternatives, because this is a national and pressing issue around the availability of independent specialist and specialist places. So this strategy names the number of places we need, and I feel really confident that we've got the right people around to make sure we deliver those places, and that's what the strategy does over a period of time.
I may have a recommendation, but I'm going to work on making it succinct whilst others ask their question.
Thank you. Councillor Krizanek.
In your report, you stated that high need block element of dedicated school grant is projected for 25-26 in the region of £45 million. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So again, that's a bit of a national picture in the way that our colleague Hannah was talking about. Some of the SEND reporting is reporting some of this issue. So that is around mainly specialist provision, which is why we want to bring our children close to home, because that's where the main cost lies. So all of the work I've just described to deliver those 252 places that is our focus. And the report also describes the fact that we're getting in earlier. So some of the head of the curve work that Councillor Cresswell's talked about, that the team have worked brilliantly with our own education community. Our head teachers across the piece have been astounding in welcoming children and saying, what can we do to welcome children in, to make sure we've got the right environments for them. So that's how we will curb that problem, is working deeply together. And I think that work is absolutely happening. So yes, it's a worrying projection. It's not dissimilar to other places, but it's one that we're working at pace on, and we'll continue with it. This strategy really addresses that issue, which is why it's in there.
Just a quick supplementary trajectory of this overspend. Is it going upwards or downwards?
It really depends on how quickly we can deliver this strategy. And I've worked in another area on this kind of issue, and it's like a piece of 3D chess, because you're addressing the children's needs, and then you have to really adapt to the children's needs that we now really understand well, and strategize for those children, the emerging needs coming through, but also you look at what's adding real value. And I know some of the targeted support we're putting in at an early point is adding real value, because that's when you're preventing the needs escalating and growing. So the more of that we do, the more we'll bring down the trajectory.
And I think some of the early intervention and such with our youngest children as well. You want to make sure the earlier we intervene, and this applies across the board with so many things. The earlier you intervene, the better the outcomes. The most important thing is to think about the better the outcomes for the child, but also it means there's less likelihood of a child needing to have very specialist provision of going into perhaps a specialist independent provision. So that's why that early intervention is so important, so key. And I have to again reiterate the way that our heads, got one of them sitting next to me actually, the way that our heads have worked so well on this, and the heads of our special schools and our early years as well have worked so well together. We've had sort of like fabulous communication and partnership work, and I think that's been really important in terms it's been appreciated by our school communities and such, the support they've had from specialist heads and specialist schools. But the other thing it's doing, it's really in building confidence and shifting the system. Greater confidence means that parents and have more faith in our schools, more faith in the system, and therefore then less likelihood to push for, as we were talking just now, for in EHCP, because they see that the needs of their child are actually being met.
Thank you. Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the same sort of question. So it says this is an overspend. So what was the original budget for this year? What was the budget for last year? What was the budget for this year? And then what will it end up costing? Because if I'm reading the paper correctly, this isn't the budget. This is how much the budget is overspending by. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and maybe it's a good follow-up recommendation is to do a kind of session on the dedicated schools grant and how it works, because it's a complicated beast and it would really help explain, so I'm very happy to do that. That's helpful.
Thank you. I've got a second one on a different subject then. So we state in the report on page 5 that we've expanded our special school estates to its limits. So there's no additional possible capacity that can be built anywhere across the whole city. That's what we're saying. Is that correct?
What we're saying is within the current maintained special school estate, but the satellite provision I mentioned before, there is option perhaps to expand that alongside that early intervention piece of outreach. So yes, currently our special schools have been absolutely brilliant and have welcomed children in. But what we will need to do is continue that great work to say, okay, where else are we going to deliver specialist places?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda and Councillor Cresswell, for that. I'll come back to you, Councillor Taylor. Do you have that recommendation?
I'm not able to be succinct, I'm afraid. It's not in my nature. I think Councillor Creswell has done a sterling job at driving these conversations at a political level with the MP, knocking on the door of Minister Morgan in particular, and actually knows Sally quite well now because she's making that case for us around capital funding. And Councillor Wood sort of drew out the key line, is that we've exhausted the state. So we don't really have any choice other than either less children who need provision or money to build more spaces, physical spaces for those kids. So I don't know what that looks like, and I'll look to you, Sally, for some guidance, but I don't know if we write a letter, if we start a petition, if we go and sit outside the DFE. But I just feel like it is now, it's very clear that these wonderful people have exhausted the options open to them in terms of creating these spaces and creating specialist places for kids. And the DFE or any other government department, quite frankly, needs to start putting their money where their mouth is for kids in Plymouth. And I know that there will be councils all across the country that will be saying exactly, I don't care about those, I care about Plymouth and I care about our kids. And we wouldn't be doing our job as a board if we didn't support Councillor Cresswell to be able to continue having those conversations with the safe knowledge that we will back her all the way. So what would be helpful, Sally, from us?
I think you're making what is really a really important political point there, and I think that we can. I don't know, I'm not meant to make the recommendations, am I? But that sending out that political message, if you like, from this scrutiny. And sending it out in what I think is we could send out in a very constructive and positive way, because one of the things that we have been doing really hard is that we have been working so much on things like the graduated approach to inclusion. We have been we've been working really hard to put as much of our children into satellite support or whatever, working on things like the targeted approach, so we have special support within our mainstream schools. So we're actually doing all of those kinds of things, and we don't know exactly what the schools bill and the SEND white paper will be when it comes out in the autumn. But I think that many of the really good things we have been doing, and these fantastic people here have been doing, are very much in line with what the government is. I might be wrong about this, but I think what the government is going to propose. So I therefore think, at the same time, we always are going to need some children are going to need to be in specialist schools. There are going to be children who have such complex needs, they're going to need to be in specialist schools. So perhaps if we can, I'm not going to make a recommendation, but let's help you out here, that we make your idea of sending a message to government, but a message to government couched in a sort of like a positive, constructive way of what we have been doing already, and that we are very much on side, and we want to do the best for our children, and we want to. We're not being just negative. We're very constructive, and we want the best for our children. And I'm quite happy to. I think your recommendation seems a very positive one.
I think your recommendation about the clarity for capital funding, which is set within the context, would be really helpful if the board would recommend and support that, so that Councillor Cresswell can write again to Minister Morgan and anyone else who is appropriate to set out what's in this report about the numbers of children that do have to attend independent specialist provision, and much of that is outside of our Plymouth City. And just on that very fact, in terms of the numbers that we've currently got, it screams that we need more capacity to meet the needs of those children in the city. We haven't got any. We have exhausted our ability to put more buildings on our special school sites, and therefore that real continued petition for some capital funding for the council to be able to build this provision, which we know by its nature is expensive provision, would be really helpful and supportive of the work that we're doing.
Is the committee happy with that as a recommendation? I'm seeing nods. Yep. Okay, so thank you, Jake, for that one.
Decipher that.
So we are noting the report, but we have an action in terms of writing for clarity around capital funding and additional specialist support. I'm going to move on to item 11, school readiness. Same team, Councillor Cresswell and Amanda, to address this issue. I am conscious of the time. I don't want to cut it short because I know this was a particular concern for the previous incarnation of this scrutiny panel, and it is a really key issue.
So it seems very timely to be discussing our approaches to school readiness, given the publication of the Best Start in Life strategy this month. This lays out the government's ambitious plan to ensure every child is ready to thrive when they start in reception year. The goals are to raise school readiness, aiming for 75% of 5-year-olds in England to reach a good level of development by 2028. It also seeks to tackle inequality early, to address gaps in development that emerge before children even enter the classroom, and to support families holistically, recognising parents and carers as children's first teachers and providing them with better tools and services to make this a reality. The key initiatives to deliver the strategy are the Best Start Family Service, a new integrated support system combining digital platforms and community-based services to help parents access advice, guidance and early years support. Local Best Start plans to be co-produced by councils and communities to tailor services to local needs, to expand childcare, roll out of the 30 hours of funded childcare for working parents, saving families up to £7,500 annually, and free breakfast clubs and school-based nurseries, increasing wraparound care and early learning opportunities. And I've been delighted to witness at first hand the impact of some of our early adopters of breakfast clubs in the city, which have enabled children to have a steady start to their school day with nutritious food and opportunities to deepen relationships with their peers and adults who support them in school. And I'm very grateful again to our schools who have trialled this approach, because school readiness is about being ready to start school, and surely about being ready to start school each and every day with a settled beginning. And I know that Councillor Taylor would actually reiterate in her visit to Pennycross Primary, in being able to see the early adopters school breakfast clubs in place. So this report demonstrates that there's a collective ambition in our city to share and aim to offer our children the best start to school. There's recognition that learning does not begin at 5 years old and at school. Children are born to learn for survival, and it is attentive and loving adults who enable the innate ability to learn to be realised. We recognise that children's motivation to learn is shaped by their experience of play and exploration. A child's curiosity can be harnessed and challenged with the right conditions. School readiness is in fact a holistic concept that includes social and emotional, physical, cognitive development. It's about whether a child and their parent and carer can navigate and contain the emotions of separating each day and feeling distant yet held in mind, ready for separation. It's about a child being able to express their needs and ideas. It's about social interaction, being able to take turns and share whilst interacting positively with peers and adults. It's about having appropriate levels of physical independence based on the child's unique needs and circumstances. Children can cope well in school when they show curiosity, follow clear, simple instructions, and engage in problem solving. Their gross motor skills are also key, and they are a key precursor to those fine motor skills of handwriting. And a child who has plenty of experience of things like climbing and building and playing with small and large toys and equipment is often much more physically ready to hold a pencil or to fasten buttons or to dress and undress themselves ready for PE. The key to achieving school readiness in our city does not lie with one agency or solely with parents and carers, or even with early years settings and schools. The key is the collective effort and support of whole school communities who celebrate and nurture our children. This creates ready families, ready school, and ready children. The old adage, it takes a village to raise a child.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. And before maybe we come to Amanda, Heidi, I'm aware that you've been sat through our meeting and may have some personal contribution to make at this point too.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me today. It's been fascinating. I'm Heidi Price, and I've got a hybrid role. I'm the head of a primary school, Yalmstone Farm Primary School in Plymouth, and I'm the CEO of the nursery schools in the city, which one is in Ham Drive and the other one is Estover. and I also run a PVI nursery, and well, actually 3 PVI nurseries. So I've got quite a good understanding of like the different kinds of ways that early years is working within the city. And the other part of my role is I happen to have the line management for the Early Years Stronger Practice Hub for the whole of the South West, which is funding for from Dorset, Bournemouth and Poole all the way down to the Isles of Scilly to help train early years practitioners. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the new government proposals, but I'm here just to support Amanda, really.
Thank you. Can I open it up to questions? Is that all right? Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. We highlight the Let's Get Chatting campaign within the report, and we highlight language and English as an additional language within here. Can I just understand how we have a focus on making sure that children going into school have a good, competent ability in English before they go, so they're not then facing the risk of exclusion from other children when they get to school? Is that a real focus that we have to make sure all kids going to school can speak good English?
There is a real focus across the partnership. So often we'll speak in our send boards with our health colleagues, because this is, as Sally said, it takes a village. Our family hubs play a key role in that early language acquisition. And so there's ever more really in that space. Speaking English for any speaker. And we do know that the world has changed around children, hasn't it? And how children interact has changed. So we work very deeply through all of our connections and our partnerships to really value with our babies serve and return. You know, it starts very, very early. So that serve and I'm addicted to those YouTube clips of serve and return, you know, where you get eye contact with the baby. Those are the kinds of activities our family hubs will nurture. And it starts way before 4 and way before school. And similarly in our settings, Heidi, doesn't it? It's highly, highly recognised as an area that we must focus on. So rhymes, singing, everything we know that creates good language.
Can I just tell you about a project that you may or may not know about, but the Dolly Parton project? Are you aware of that? Yes, the Imagination Library. So we've worked in partnership with charities across the city, the local authority Stronger Practice Hub and the Family Hubs to really try and offer, I think we're offering now the 5 most deprived wards in the city. Every child under 5 can sign up, and all of the nurseries in those areas can sign up, and the childminders, to be able to get a book a month. And then the idea is then that within the nurseries, we are training them how to use something called Talking Time, which is Oxford University programme. And basically it's just how do you use a book to help develop a child's understanding of language. And so that's happening over the next few years. It's been happening since last June, and you know, so obviously we're promoting it. So if you're in one of those areas, then please encourage people to do it, because it needs lots of promotion. But we've had very good sign up.
Councillor Noble.
So, obviously, I'm not sure how much I understand of the school readiness, but I suppose it's the skills a child has when they arrive at school. Could that be personal skills like eating or toileting? And obviously that might create, if you've got a very wide range of skills, that makes it, obviously that make it harder for schools to teach, because if not only would you have the inclusion of people with different needs, but obviously children that could be at different stages of different bits of development. And obviously there's quite a lot of measurement of children in years 1 and 2. It doesn't need to be a change in the approach of trying to get all the children sort of like hemmed into a cone going forwards.
I'll
I'll let some of my other colleagues, and particularly Heidi, come back in more detail. But one of the things that is in the report is about transitions and the work that has been done through the transition portal and working with there's a range of early years providers, be they nurseries, be they private providers or whatever, and working with them, so you've got that sort of transition going into foundation classrooms, which means that that if there are areas that can be identified and children as they come in can be supported, or supported in fact before they actually enter into a foundation class. And yes, you're right, there is a wide range of children coming into our foundation classes. However, that good high quality transition, which I think we've moved forward quite considerably on that through the transition portal, is certainly one practical way of addressing that, and also flagging up again those children where there needs to be some sort of intervention. But I'll let Heidi to more details.
Well, I mean, I think obviously I can't speak for every primary school. I can only really speak for my own primary school and people I know who are heads. But certainly we've adapted our provision. So because certainly since COVID, we've had more children come in who are still at nursery stage in terms of their milestones. And so we've had to provide that alongside the provision that we're providing for the children who are going into the foundation stage classroom. For example, for the first time ever this year, we've had to put more gates around because some children have come into the provision without the knowledge of being able to stay in one space where they're, as you normally would be. So whereas in a nursery you would have more sort of like gates around to keep children in certain areas. So we've had to sort of change the environment, provide and offer different opportunities for children depending on where they are with their development. And I would imagine that all good schools will be doing that. Another thing we've had to do since COVID is have more of the toileting and training children how to use the toilet. But I have to say that has actually improved this year. So in the nurseries that I'm running, I've seen less children who are needing to go into primary school still wearing a nappy, but I know across the country that is a massive problem. And it's something that we are working with parents on.
Do you think, as obviously now we're some years since the COVID period, do you think some of those things are perhaps partly to do with that disruption to families and home life that happened, or was it something that was going before any, perhaps the readiness was sliding beforehand and it just got worse, as quite a lot of other things seem to?
I think that, I mean, during COVID, I was writing action plans for parents about how to get up, have breakfast and get their children ready for school. So it really was, if you were at home, I think a lot of people were just saying, well, there isn't a routine now because they didn't have a routine. So I think people have become, some people like not having a routine. And also there's a thing around, I think possibly it's become, it was that, by 2 you would be potty trained, but I think now that's sort of like has crept to be 4. So I think there's lots of sort of like things that have happened as a result of COVID that we now need to change back. And having the family hubs is really helpful because, all of those kinds of like good messages are going out from all of us about what systems work and encouraging parents to sort of like have that approach.
If you think about 4 and 5-year-olds who would have been born in that sort of 2020 in lockdown, and one of the things that you saw, and I think Amanda can give a very good counted this, but you think about a child, when a baby is born, it's a time of massive celebration in the family, isn't it? You know, whatever your family, it's a big thing of celebration, and babies get passed around from grandparents who are completely doting on them and such. You think about those children who actually went through that period of time where they didn't get handled and passed around to lots of different doting relatives and things like that, and didn't interact in that sort of way. And that's bound to have had, in fact, on all children during that period, has got to have had some quite profound impact.
I did witness that at first
Councillor,
hand. Yes. Sorry, Chair. So I did witness that at first hand, having run children's centres before. So the notable difference between children who came into the children's centre post-COVID. Yeah.
Councillor Krizanek, you're going to ask the last question.
Thank you. From your personal experience, the transitional period from nursery to primary school, what would you say the time limit was?
What do you mean by the time limit? Sorry.
I mean, for child to move from nursery into primary school and be equipped, shall I say, to be able to function properly, what would you say the time limit?
I think it depends on the experience of the child. So, you know, where is the nursery? How closely does the nursery work with the school? I know that at the moment there's a promotion around school-based nurseries. I mean, I'm running all sorts of different nurseries. I can see that we've got a nursery on site at school, and the children they feel like it's their school. It doesn't, absolutely seamless. There's no transition. It's not even one day. You know, they're just here, and then now they're in a different room. Whereas, you know, that's not the same. It depends on the relationship, I think, that the children have with the nurseries have with the schools that they're working with. And so that's why we're working on this transition project, so that children feel confident in their new surroundings.
Thank you for that insight too. It's been very valuable. So we're clearly going to note the report. Are there any recommendations?
I would recommend that nurseries in the local areas have a much closer approach with the local primary schools, so the children have that first-hand experience and feel familiar with the schools.
Thank you for that. I'm getting nods around the room. Anything else, Jake, that we've picked up from questions? Okay, thank you. Yes.
As a very big supporter of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, funded by the North Yard Community Trust, that's an advert. Could we? I think it would be really nice if everybody was aware actually of what they did, because actually at North Yard Trust on Tuesday we topped up the funding because so many children are now benefiting from it that we hadn't given them enough money, and I think that is a sign that it's working. And they are some of the most deprived children in the city. So even just like a one-pager from PSIP, just to like tell us how it's going, the benefit. Love to hear some nice stories of children that have, you know, learnt to read, because this is about starting a lifelong love of reading. I think it would just be nice in amongst all of the other, you know, heavy stuff that we look at, to just see a bit of like relief as to how community funding and a small idea can become something quite as lovely as that.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm sure we can do that.
Can I just add to that?
Of course.
What I loved about the project is that you've got the people working together, charities working together. And I talked to the Argyle Trust about the project, and I think they could get involved, and they've got quite a lot of money. So I think there are some other charities in the city. So rather than everything being based on one charity, we can sort of like combine charities. So it is about publicity, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so our last two items on the agenda are the action log, which is on pages 123 and 124, and the work programme. If we go to the action log first, I wonder, David, if you would be prepared to talk to this, please?
I'm just going to bring Amanda in, if that's okay, in relation to the two items that are below or the three items that are below the is it beige or orangey colour? Would you just give an update on those, Amanda, please?
I can. So the first one, I believe, is around are playing fields around schools protected? The broad answer is yes, they're kind of protected in law. You have to seek permission. There's the school premises regulations, I think it's 2012, denote that every school must have recreation and sports facilities. So yes, they're protected, and you have to seek permission in order to change it. A sort of a view of every Plymouth school I don't currently have, and it's something I would like. But yeah, you have to seek permission. It's the same for academies as well. They have to seek permission. It's a different act, but. We've covered that one today.
I just wonder whether I can put it into a written briefing rather than a verbal report, so it closes it off nicely.
Yes, yes.
I'll arrange for Karen to do that.
Okay, that's fine. So we'll pick that up and make sure we've got a written note of that within the record of the meeting. But we've said that today, haven't we? And then we've also talked about transitions and the Transitions Board and the involvement of the Plymouth Parent Carer Voice. So I don't know if there's anything further you wanted to say on that, Lisa.
I think that
ideally to close that down.
Yeah, we can close that down. That links really closely to the co-production ladder work that we've done in the framework, and it was just making sure that when we seek the views and the collaboration and co-production with families, that we're not oversaturating that and asking them to do lots of things at the same time. So we've created a really clear calendar across the year, so it's very clear to PPCV and all our parents who are supporting that what they can get involved with and when across the year.
And in terms of the work programme, which is on pages 125 to 128, I haven't seen much. We've had a little bit of a conversation in terms of budget monitoring, but we haven't had much in terms of budget monitoring in this meeting tonight. And so maybe there should be an item, because our responsibility is to make sure that we're aware of overspends. Of course we are, but we don't overspend even more than we're aware of. Are there any other items that we need to add to the work programme?
Could we add something on the early adopter schools for us to look at how that's going? No, so yeah, the breakfast club, the free breakfast clubs. As a, I should maybe declare an interest. This is the right programme. As a governor at Pennycross, actually, what it's done there is incredible, which of course is a maintained school. So it would be good to see how it's done in other schools. And there's also a financial element, which is whether the funding from government does match up to what the schools need, whether there is some difference in what individual schools need, etc., etc. So I think it would be good for us to look at that. I'm really supportive of it. I think it's the best thing that this government has done so far, personally. We just need to keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't put schools in financial difficulty by trying to do a good thing.
Absolutely. Anything else? Councillor Wood and then Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to have on the work programme, we've just gone through the action log. We just said we've closed the playing fields piece and we were going to return to it. I don't think that is closed. I would like a 1 or 2 pager, doesn't need to be something major, that just gives direction to ourselves as to when, if a school wanted to change a playing field to say they need permission, I want to know permission from whom. I want very clear guidance I can look at on a 2-pager to see how our playing fields are then linked into the joint local plan. That's really what I'm looking for.
Through you, Chair. I'm just wondering whether this is something for this panel to look at, because you're entering into, as you say, joint local plan, which would come under natural infrastructure and growth, I would assume. Maybe the Scrutiny Management Board, and maybe that's a discussion to have there.
Councillor Noble, I saw your hand just now.
There's money for military children, and that is, I think that is spent by schools, but I think maybe look at that and how it's communicated back to families and things. and how that's utilised as a.
Was there anybody else? Councillor Crisner.
I would really like to have a proper debate on a home elective education and impact on the children that are educated in a line with the curriculums that are taught at schools, and advantages and disadvantages that come with it.
It's on the work programme, so your wish is easy to grant. Councillor Steele. Oh, you've decided not to.
No, okay, well, I just want to say to some of the newer councillors on here, because obviously they've mentioned about homeschooling, I think it's important that we recognise that it is a legitimate form of education, and there are, obviously we want to ensure that children aren't pushed out of education into homeschooling because of reasons they're not being provided the right education, but we don't want to ostracise parents who have their right to choose to home educate their children. So when we're talking about having a debate, it's just acknowledging the fact that it's a legitimate form of education in the UK.
Okay, so thank you for that, and we're reassured that it is on the work programme, which we will look at in terms of scheduling for the rest of the year. My thanks to the officers who've left, the officers that have stayed. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you too to Heidi.
Yeah, one
no
final
doubt
point.
No doubt you have a school to go to in the morning, so we appreciate the time you've given us. Councillor Steele?
Just a very, very quick one on my point around AI, if that can be added on the work plan. I just wanted to make sure that's noted.
Talk to me afterwards. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.